Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Everyone winced as Slive writhed on the floor, his screams piercing through the air. He clutched his hand, staring wide-eyed at the bent, disfigured finger. My finger, my finger!" Slive wailed. Joe, sitting just a few desks away, felt a twinge of sympathy. He knew that pain all too well. It was sharper, deeper than the others could imagine. It was the kind of pain that left a mark, not just on the body but in the mind. And it was something he never wanted to experience again. Eventually, Slive's shrieking became unbearable, and Max snapped. He lifted his foot, and without hesitation, swung it. His shoe struck Slive clean across the face, sending his head skidding along the floor. The room went dead silent. A few students jolted up from their seats, instinctively stepping back, their eyes wide with disbelief. Did Max just do that? I think he finally lost it. Yeah, I've seen it happen before. Sometimes they just break under the pressure and lash out. I've seen breakdowns too, but this feels different. They all whispered, glancing around nervously. When students were pushed too far, bullied to the edge, it wasn't unheard of for one of them to snap. They'd lash out, throw punches, toss chairs, scream until they were dragged away. But what Max had just done didn't feel like a breakdown. It felt like something else. Something controlled. Something terrifying. It wasn't unusual for kids who were bullied to eventually snap, to scream, throw things, flail their arms around in a desperate attempt to push back after being pushed too far. But Max wasn't doing any of that. He stood there, perfectly still, focused, calm. What he had done, it didn't look like a breakdown. It looked practiced, as if he'd done it 100 times before. "Have you gone mad, Max?" Co shouted, stepping forward with disbelief in his eyes. "You finally cracked, huh? After what happened to your little friend? Sorry, big friend. I can't believe you still haven't learned your place." Then, Co did something unexpected. He raised his hands and clapped. Twice, loud and sharp. "Everyone, clear out," he commanded. Max had never seen Co act like this before, had never heard those words from him, but it was clear they meant something, some kind of hidden signal, because immediately the classroom shifted. Students began moving fast. Desks and chairs were pushed to the sides, scraped along the floor until the center of the room was wide open. A few of the girls and some of the quieter boys grabbed their bags and slipped out, not daring to stick around. One of the guys dragged Slive's limp body across the floor, laying him out of the way. But the rest, 12 of them, all boys, gathered around Co. Close-knit, standing firm, their eyes all locked on Max. Even Joe was among them, and every single one of them looked ready for a fight. Right? These are all the delinquents in the class. The ones who greet Co every morning like he's royalty. I get it now. They're following his lead, just like always. Outside the room, the students who had fled were now gathered in the hallway, peering through the glass window. Watching, waiting. No one dared to step in. "Max," Co said, his voice loud and clear. "I could tell something was different about you. You've been acting strange for a while now. But I'm here to show you nothing's changed." Max slowly curled his fingers into fists as he studied the scene. 12 of them. 11 if I don't count Joe. Can this body really handle that many at once? Max thought. There wasn't time to wonder. Several of the boys charged at him across the room. In one swift motion, Max spun around, grabbed a chair, and hurled it at the group. It smashed into the legs of 2 boys mid-sprint, sending them tumbling over each other with loud grunts of pain. Without hesitation, Max dashed forward, catching even more of them off guard. He leapt into the air and delivered a devastating Superman punch, his fist driving straight into the first kid's face. The force of the blow lifted the student off his feet. He crumpled to the floor like a rag doll, completely out cold. Right after, Max ducked beneath another punch and drove a solid kick into one of the student's stomachs. The boy folded over, gasping, and Max quickly moved behind him, grabbing both of his arms and yanking him upright. In an instant, he turned the student into a makeshift shield. But Max didn't hold him for long. He kicked the stunned boy forward, sending him crashing into the group. As the student's body slammed into the others, Max followed up without hesitation. He stepped in and swung a wide, powerful hook, smashing it into someone's face with everything he had. I have to take them out in one hit. If they get back up, this is going to get a lot harder. Outside, the students watching through the windows were stunned, and the crowd kept growing. Kids from other classes, students passing through the hall, they all paused, drawn in by the commotion. Everyone wanted to see what was happening. Damn, did you know Mac could fight like that? He's holding his own, and it's just him. It's like watching a stunt guy in a movie or something. It wasn't just the bystanders who were surprised. Joe, who had only pretended to jump in and was hanging back behind the others, was just as shocked. I knew he was strong, but fighting one person and going up against this many at once, those are two completely different things. How'd he learn to fight like this? Joe thought, stunned. Max, on the other hand, had lost count of how many times he'd faced situations like this, him versus a crowd. But this time was different. This wasn't his original body. He'd only been training for a week. His stamina was getting there, sure, but his strength? That would take much longer to return. The students he'd hit earlier? They were still fighting. One of them managed to land a solid kick to Max's stomach. He tensed just in time, but it still winded him. Sensing an opening, two of the students tackled him around the waist, slamming his back against the wall with a heavy thud. They pinned him there, locking down his arms, and Max could see a third one charging toward him, fist pulled back, aiming straight for his face. He tried to move his hands, but he couldn't. They had him locked in place. The punch came closer and closer. Then it stopped, caught midair by someone else. Sorry, Joe said coolly. My hand moved on its own, and without hesitation, he reeled back and drove his fist into the attacker's face, dropping him instantly. There was major confusion among the delinquents over what had just happened. They had always operated as a unit, one voice, one leader, and that leader was Co. They followed his orders without question. So seeing one of their own suddenly break ranks, it threw everything off. That brief moment of hesitation was all Max needed. He drove his knee straight into the face of the student holding him, then grabbed the other by the collar and hurled him in Joe's direction. The flying student tried to sidestep, not out of fear of being hit, but because he assumed Joe was still an ally, on the same side like always. He was wrong. Joe brought his knee up hard, smashing it into the boy's face, then tossed him like a rag doll against the classroom wall. With the immediate threat cleared, Max stepped forward, catching his breath as he wiped a bit of spit from the corner of his mouth. Nice one, Max said. Looks like you're earning your keep. I'll throw in a bonus when this is all over. Joe, what is this? Why are you over there standing right next to Max? Co shouted, his voice cracking. Why would you do this? KO's mind was nearly unraveling. Since the start of high school, he and his trio had been inseparable. What could have possibly torn them apart? So much so that Joe was now willingly fighting against him. They used to have fun doing everything together. Joe was like him. He wouldn't just switch sides because he felt bad. Would he? I hate to say it, Max thought as he slid into a fighting stance. But something someone told me a while ago is true. Money rules all. The students surged forward again, but this time, Max didn't have to face them alone. He quickly kicked one in the stomach, then followed it up with a clean uppercut to another's face. Ducking and weaving through several punches, Max spotted another coming straight at him. Without hesitation, he kicked a desk forward. It slammed into the oncoming student, knocking him off balance. Then, dodging one last swing, Max grabbed the attacker by the collar. In a swift motion, he yanked him forward and drove the back of his head straight into the desk with a brutal slam. At first, those watching from outside were amazed by how Max was able to take on so many of them in such rapid succession. But the longer they watched him, the more something else became clear. They were starting to realize just how brutal his fighting style really was. Max didn't care where he struck someone or what he used to do it. He was willing to break bones, use chairs, whatever it took. It wasn't clean, and in some moments, it was hard for others to even watch. Off to the side, Joe was holding his own. He didn't have as many people crowding around him as Max did, which made things a little easier. Only 2 students had come at him. Joe always felt like he was stronger than most of the kids in his class, and right now, it felt like he was proving that. He'd taken a few hits, his jaw was aching, but he dished out heavier ones in return. One of the students was now laid out on the floor, not getting up anytime soon. Crap, that hurt, Joe muttered, wiggling his jaw. Still, he was taking advantage of something, confusion. The others were hesitating, and that gave him just the edge he needed. You know what I'm starting to realize? Being the one getting hit doesn't feel too good, Joe said, grabbing the other student by the collar, pulling his fist back to throw a punch. But just before he could, a leg shot between them, slamming into his face. Joe stumbled backward, crashing into one of the nearby bookshelves. Dazed, he looked up to see who it was and saw Ko standing there. I can't believe it. I can't believe you'd do that to me, Ko said, his voice shaking with rage. Was everything fake? Is this what loyalty means to you? How are we ever supposed to enjoy another day together? You're ruining everything, he screamed. Joe forced himself up, his legs trembling. He needed to be ready. He could already see Ko's leg lifting again, aiming for his stomach. But then at the last second, it shifted course. The kick slammed right into the side of Joe's head, snapping it to the side. His vision blurred, and before he could react, another kick drove into his stomach, sending him back into the wall again. Joe slid down, collapsing to the floor. His eyes fluttered shut as the room spun around him. I didn't want to hurt you myself, F***CK. Ko shouted, his voice raw and cracking. A heavy thud echoed behind Ko, and when he spun around, he saw Max standing there. His forehead was bloodied. Someone had smashed a chair into him during the chaos. A thin stream of blood trickled down the side of his face, but he didn't seem to notice or care. For some reason, Ko actually felt a chill. Max looked menacing. It wasn't just the blood, it was the sight of the other students lying around him, either knocked out cold or groaning on the floor in agony, unable to move. So you managed to beat up a bunch of nobodies, and now you think you're hot sh**T? Ko shouted. What? Have you been learning martial arts or boxing or something? He took a step forward, his fists clenched. And now you decided to fight back. You think taking me on is going to be the same? There's a reason I was made the head of this class, and you're about to find out why. I already know why, Max replied coldly. Because you're the biggest hole out of all of them. His eyes locked onto Ko's, sharp and filled with fury. Don't worry, Ko. I saved you for last, because you're the worst of them all. You don't just deserve a beating, you deserve so much more. The crowd outside the classroom was growing by the second, pulling in even some of the teachers. But the hallway was so packed, not even they could get close. A few particular students were even using their bodies to block the way, keeping anyone from pushing through. Among the chaos, one girl managed to squeeze past the others. She made her way up to the window, determined to get a better look inside. And when she finally did, her eyes widened in disbelief at the sight of the two figures still standing. What is that, Max? Sherry gasped. Max's ex-fiancé, one of the only people in the world who knew his real name. The students crowding the hallway had been so mesmerized and shocked by everything that had happened so far, most of them had completely forgotten to take out their phones. But now that it was just Max and Ko left standing in the room, phones were suddenly everywhere, raised high, recording every second of what was about to go down. Hey, who do you think's going to win? Should we start a betting pool or something? One student whispered. I mean, Max just took out like half the class. He's got to be tired by now. Still, I'm kind of rooting for him. Ko and his crew were total jerks to him the whole time. Yeah, I feel like they went way too far. Another agreed. True, but if we're talking about who's going to win, it's probably Ko. He's got natural talent. I heard all the sports teams begged him to join. He's fast, skilled, but hates putting effort into anything. That's why he never signed up. Instead, he ended up living this kind of life. Yeah, there's a reason Ko's the head of the class, another student added. It's because he actually knows how to fight. No one messes with him because they know they'd never win. Regardless of the whispers and rumors, the students were buzzing with excitement, eager to see what would happen next. Haha, Max, I think you've been hit in the head one too many times, Ko taunted. Let me fix that. Maybe a few more hits will knock some sense into you. Ko charged in, launching a high kick aimed straight for Max's head. Max raised both arms just in time to block the strike, but the impact was heavy, his forearms stung, already going numb. This damned weak body. Max cursed internally. Ko didn't slow down. A second kick slammed into Max's stomach, forcing him back. He stumbled and felt his spine slam into one of the desks pushed against the wall. Seeing Max cornered, Ko rushed in again until a whole pencil case came flying out of nowhere and smacked him right in the face. Items scattered everywhere, and Ko naturally blinked. Right after, he saw a large head come his way, and it was swung right into his nose. The full force crashing. A crack was heard and blood was gushing from KO's mouth. The head and forehead is a lot harder and heavier than people think. Max shouted, "Sure, you might know how to fight a bit, but you don't know how to really fight." While Ko was startled from the hit to the head, Max didn't let up for a moment as he charged in. He could see Ko was panicked and threw out another kick, but just like before, Max had predicted this and moved to the side, and with a heavy kick of his own, had kicked the other foot still on the ground. He had swept him up, causing him to fall right to the floor. Right after, Max lifted his foot and slammed the heel of his foot right into KO's stomach, forcing all of the wind and air out of his body. Ko could hardly breathe, but Max wasn't done there. He was nowhere near done. He then started to drag Ko by his head, pulling him to the edge of the table. "You wrote all of those words on that table, right?" Max said. "You couldn't let things go even after death. Sam can never use his hands again, and you have decided to use your hands to do something like this." Max then had picked up one of the pencils and spread KO's hand right out on the table. In one smooth motion, he lifted it and slammed it right down. The pencil went right through KO's hand and stuck to the table, sticking out. "Ah!" Ko screamed as he felt pain run up his entire arm, and he had no clue what to do. If he tried to move his hand away, the pencil might rip further into his body. He wanted to try grab the pencil with the other hand of his, but it was grabbed by Max before he could do anything. "Right? A person has two hands, right?" Max said, as he placed it on the table again and grabbed another pencil and shoved it right through KO's other hand, sticking them both in. "Arg!" Ko screamed once again. "Come on," Max said as he left Ko be to look for something else in the classroom. "How much punishment? How many things did you do a day to Max and Sam, huh? And now for one day, I give you a little pain and you can't take it." Saliva was falling from KO's mouth due to all the pain. He had no idea what to do as he stared at the two pencils that had lodged in his hand and were partly in the table itself. The children watching, some of them had stopped recording, others wanted to get all down. But they were in shock, and they were afraid. "Hey, should we go do something? If we don't head in there, do you think Max might kill him?" It was the worry on all of their minds. They were there every day in class. They had seen what Max went through on the daily, which was why they wouldn't be surprised that now Max had this opportunity, that he wouldn't have gone as far as that. "Ko, I said you would receive the worst punishment of all," Max said as he took the cap off a marker he had found on the floor. He then used the marker to carefully write on his forehead. The letters spelled out MURDRER. Sherry continued to watch this outside the window, and she didn't understand how any of this had come about. What happened to him? Is this really the pushover Max that I know? Sherry thought. Max then turned the table around, and Ko moved along with it, worried that his hands would suffer more pain, and now they could all see the words drawn on his hands. The tears and dribble flowing out of KO's mouth, as nearly the entire school watched. Several of the students were taking photos and filming it all. No, stop," Ko shouted. "Stop." Just then, pushing through the crowded students and managing to get in the class was the homeroom teacher. "What is the meaning of all this?" the teacher yelled. In a world overflowing with technology, where sharing anything was just a tap away, keeping secrets had become nearly impossible. The videos, yes, multiple, capturing the now infamous classroom incident were circulating like wildfire. Shot from different angles, some with commentary, others with stunned silence. They were being passed from phone to phone, screen to screen. By the end of the day, there wasn't a single student in the entire school who didn't know what had gone down. Whether they watched it firsthand or seen it through shaky footage and gas in the hallways, everyone had seen. The event had quickly earned its name too, the Mad Max incident. Without the videos, most probably wouldn't have even believed it. The idea that Max, the quiet, awkward guy who barely drew attention, could have done something so extreme, It would have sounded like some ridiculous rumor made up for attention. But the footage didn't lie. And the video hadn't just stayed among the regular students, either. Outside, down a few cracked stairs that led away from the rusted metal cage beside the gym hall, Dipter was sitting casually with his legs stretched out. His phone was tilted sideways, and his sharp eyes were locked onto the screen as he watched the entire thing unfold for the third, or maybe fourth time. "Isn't this like a huge problem?" Jay asked, arms crossed as he leaned against the fence nearby. He had already seen the video, just like the rest of them. They all had. But Dipter? Dipter was replaying it, again and again, face unreadable. "Yeah, I mean, that's our target, right?" Snide chimed in, his voice unusually high with concern. "Looks like the guy's lost it. And the others must have really messed him up." Still, Dipter said nothing. Not a word. Not a smirk. He waited until the video ended one more time before finally lowering his phone and slipping it back into his pocket with slow precision. Only then did he glance up, his face unreadable, eyes dark with thought. "Who would have thought," Dipter muttered, still brushing the dust off his pants as he stood up, "that the whole time he actually could fight back? And from the looks of it, he's been in more than a few fights before." "Not just fights," Snide added, shaking his head. "Did you see what he did? That wasn't some outburst or fluke. He knew exactly what he was doing." "Yeah," Jay said, and he didn't hesitate, not even for a second. Dipter's gaze narrowed slightly, lost in thought. Either he's done this before, or there's something seriously wrong going on in that head of his. Jay stepped forward, speaking in a quieter tone. "Do you want us to handle it? I think it'd be better than letting this get out of control. Better than the other option." But Dipter simply waved him off. "No, leave it." "You sure?" "He's already done the worst thing he could have done," Dipter said, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Reacting like this, going full Mad Max in front of the whole school, that's his own downfall. He's finished. He just doesn't know it yet." The fallout from the classroom incident came swiftly. Every student involved, or even present, was called in for questioning. 2 classrooms had been converted into temporary interview rooms, where teachers tried to piece together the chaos. Everyone had a different angle, a different detail to add, and the teachers were desperate to form a full picture of what had actually happened. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, the school nurse did her best to tend to the bruises, bloody noses, and busted lips. Her tray was already lined with ice packs and cotton swabs soaked in antiseptic. The air reeked of alcohol and tension. But Max? He was questioned in a room all on his own. It wasn't just because he'd been at the center of the storm. It was because of what he'd done, what everyone saw him do. The staff didn't want to risk anything escalating, especially not with the same kids involved. Whatever had happened in that room, they couldn't let it happen again. Max had given his version of the story as clearly as he could. He explained that it all started when he stood up for himself, after being provoked after the endless bullying. He said he only hit back once, but that was all it took. The entire class turned on him. From that moment on, it became him against everyone else. He told them he did what he had to, that he had no choice. But even as the words left his mouth, Max knew how they would sound to the people on the other side of the desk. There wasn't a better explanation he could offer, not one that would make any of this easier to swallow. Now, he sat alone in a classroom, the tension pressing down like a weight on his shoulders. They might expel me for this, Max thought, leaning forward with his elbows resting on his knees. But honestly, that wouldn't be the worst outcome. I already planned on getting out of here eventually. His mind churned with thoughts of Dipter, the real target, the one orchestrating things behind the scenes. There are other ways to get to him, other ways to find the information I need. And yet, one thing kept gnawing at the back of his mind. If he was expelled, if this really was how it all ended, then why had the real Max Stern stayed through all of this? Why hadn't he used the money? Why suffer through so much when there were options? None of it made sense. Just then, the silence was broken. The classroom door slid open, and standing there was Mr. McKenzie, his homeroom teacher. The man's face was unreadable. "Come on, Max," he said. "We're heading to the principal's office." Max stood without saying a word, quietly following behind. The hallway felt long, the walls pressing in. When they arrived at the principal's office, Max was immediately taken aback. The room was luxurious, 2 leather sofas, a massive polished desk, tall windows with expensive-looking curtains, and walls adorned with framed awards and artwork. Everything looked like it cost more than most people made in a year. This is a public school, right? Max thought as he sat down across from the principal. Do principals here really get paid this well? Sitting across from Max was a rather short man dressed in a pinstripe suit. His balding head had clearly been carefully styled, his remaining hair slicked back in a failed attempt to cover it up. Behind him, Mr. McKenzie stood silently, now positioned behind the principal like some looming presence. Max, the principal barked, his voice sharp and full of reprimand. Do you even realize how serious your actions were today? Max didn't respond. He could tell that the principal wasn't looking for an answer anyway. He was just getting started. The school is already in a fragile state, the principal continued. With the recent tragedy and everything surrounding it, we've been walking on thin ice. And now this happens. You single-handedly turned the classroom into a war zone. His voice rose in frustration as he leaned forward. Do you know what kind of mess this is going to create? The parents of those students are furious. Some are already talking about pressing charges. Hospital bills will have to be covered. And because of the severity of what happened, the police will have no choice but to get involved. Most students in Max's position would have gone quiet at those words. The fear of legal trouble, police involvement, and the looming threat of expulsion would have been enough to silence anyone. But not Max. Not someone who had already faced fear in much darker places. He raised his eyes slowly and looked directly at the principal. So now you get involved? Max said, his voice calm but cutting. Tell me something, Mr. McKenzie. He turned slightly to look over his shoulder at the teacher standing behind. What's different this time compared to everything that happened before? You must have heard it, Max said, his voice steady but full of restrained fury. Or maybe you saw it yourself, the countless times I was bullied, the time Sam was bullied, the bruises on our bodies, the names scrawled across our desks like we weren't even human. It was all right there in front of you. He leaned forward now, not yelling, but speaking with a sharp intensity that pierced the room. But it wasn't your problem, was it? So long as no one made a scene, you could pretend it didn't exist. Sweep it under the rug. Wipe your hands clean because it wasn't on paper because no one reported it in the right way. His fists clenched at his sides, trembling slightly. This school did nothing for Sam, did nothing for me. And now, the second I take things into my own hands, I'm the one being punished. I'm the one being threatened. He shook his head in disbelief. Max had always hated the system, especially the school system. The way it turned a blind eye. The way it protected those in control and silenced those who suffered. Max, what are you saying? Mr. McKenzie finally spoke up, his voice edged with concern. We've gathered countless testimonies from the students. Every single one of them said the same thing, that you went crazy, that you attacked your classmates unprovoked. They're the ones who ended up hurt. Max wasn't surprised. Of course they'd stick together. It was their word against his. A united class against a single outcast. That much he had already expected. But what made Max's blood truly boil, what caused the vein on his forehead to throb, was the name Sam. Or rather, the absence of it. Not once had the teacher brought him up. As if he never existed. As if what had happened to Sam had nothing to do with any of this. And that, more than anything, lit the fire in Max's chest. What the principal said earlier is important, Max. Mr. McKenzie continued, his voice colder now, more deliberate. The police are getting involved. And since this incident happened so soon after what recently occurred, he paused as if savoring the moment. I've decided to tell them the truth. That you, Max Smith, were the one constantly bullying Sam Churn. Max's heart dropped. A deep, sinking feeling pulled at his chest as the words hit him. For a split second, he caught it, the faintest smirk tugging at the corners of both the principal's and Mr. McKenzie's lips. Subtle, but unmistakable. They weren't shocked. They weren't confused. They were expecting this. No, Max thought, his eyes narrowing. Are they in on this? The whole damn thing? He clenched his fists tightly under the desk, forcing himself not to explode. While the students were being interviewed one by one to give their accounts of the incident, Mr. McKenzie had decided to pay the principal a visit in advance before any final decision was made about the matter. He stood in the hallway alone, right in front of the principal's office. Before entering, he looked left and right, ensuring no one was around, then carefully unlocked the door and stepped inside. As soon as he shut the door behind him, the principal's voice rang out sharply. "No one followed you, right?" The principal asked, his tone tense. "Of course not," Mr. Mackenzie replied, quickly making his way to the desk, rubbing his forehead. It was clear the whole situation had him on edge. "I thought that after everything that happened last time, the students would calm down. And now, something this serious happens again, so soon after." "You're the one who's worried?" The principal snapped, slamming his fist down on the desk. His forehead was drenched in sweat, far more than Mr. Mackenzie's. "The school board is going to chew me out over this. They're going to say we can't even keep control of the school, that we've lost grip of our students. Do you know what that means for me?" He was shouting so loudly now that Mr. Mackenzie couldn't even get a word in edgewise. "I'm already a principal at the bottom of the list," the man ranted, pacing behind his desk. "Shifted to this dump of a school in the middle of nowhere. If this goes on my record, I'll have nowhere left to go. No one's going to hire a principal who can't even manage their own students." He then pointed an accusing finger at Mr. Mackenzie. "And don't think for a second this all falls on me. You're part of this mess, too." Mr. Mackenzie lowered his head, his gaze fixed on the floor, a look of guilt and shame crossing his face. "But are we protected?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "They helped us out last time, didn't they? They'll get us through this again, right?" "You fool!" the principal roared, grabbing a thick book from his desk and hurling it across the room. It hit Mr. Mackenzie square in the side before thudding onto the floor. "There's always a limit to what they can do and how far they're willing to go," the principal shouted. "If you had just paid better attention to your class, if you had done your job, we wouldn't be in this mess to begin with." The room fell into a heavy silence. Though no more words were exchanged, the tension was suffocating. Both men knew exactly what was at stake. Then, suddenly, a flash of inspiration lit up Mr. Mackenzie's face. "Wait, I think I have a solution. An idea that might make this all go away," he said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. The principal sat in silence, listening with a sharp, discerning ear, fully prepared to shoot down the idea if it even sounded foolish. "I think," Mr. Mackenzie began, nervously licking his lips, "there's a way we can make all of this disappear." The principal leaned forward ever so slightly, intrigued. "Right now, the school board is breathing down our necks because of what happened with Sam," Mr. Mackenzie continued. "There are already rumors spreading across the school that he was being bullied. The police might have dropped the case for now, but this incident with Max, it gives them the perfect excuse to get involved again. And this time, it'll be much harder to make them walk away." He swallowed hard before saying the next part. "But what if we connected both incidents? What if we made Max the cause of all of it? If we pinned both tragedies, the bullying, Sam's death, and this violent outbreak, on one individual, then maybe, just maybe, we can contain the damage." Mr. Mackenzie's voice lowered, and he stepped closer. "If we frame Max as the common thread, the source of all the trouble, and expel him, maybe even recommend further action, it'll satisfy the school board, the police, even the parents. It's just one student, right?" The room was still. Then, slowly, the principal leaned back in his chair, the corner of his mouth twitching into the faintest smirk. "I think," he said, his voice calm and deliberate, "you've come up with a very good solution." And now, at this very moment, sitting across from them in the principal's office, Max was unaware that they had already decided. They were going to pin everything on him. With so many eyewitnesses, testimonies, and even adults involved, there's no defense he can come up with, Mr. Mackenzie thought confidently. "Especially if I, his homeroom teacher, speak against him. I do feel bad for you, Max, but our jobs are on the line. You can move to a new school. It won't impact your life the way this would destroy ours." The principal and Mr. Mackenzie waited in silence for Max to respond. He hadn't said a word in a while, and just as the tension was starting to thicken, they noticed something strange. His shoulders were moving up and down. Then came a sound. Laughter. A low, amused chuckle that quickly built into full-blown laughter. "Ha ha ha! Are you all right, Max?" The principal asked, his tone tight. You do understand how serious this situation is, don't you? Max's laughter came to an abrupt stop. He looked up, locking eyes with both of them, his gaze sharp, unwavering. You know, Max began, his voice now deadly calm. I would have accepted it if you just expelled me for what I did today. That would have been fair. But instead, you're trying to pin everything on me? Sam's death, the classroom fight, all of it. He leaned forward, the disappointment clear in his tone. This is the decision you two, adults, the so-called role models of this school, have made? I expected better. He shook his head, lips curled in bitter amusement. I really should have known better. Max leaned forward across the desk, getting uncomfortably close to the principal. I'm going to give you one last chance, he said, his voice low and firm. And I mean it. I'm fed up with this F***King school. If you go through with this, I promise you'll regret it. As the principal locked eyes with Max, a chill ran down his spine. It felt like he was staring into the eyes of someone truly unhinged. With everything they'd just seen him do, the principal was beginning to feel genuine fear. Look at this. Now you're threatening the principal? He snapped, trying to maintain authority. You're a child who's completely lost their mind. There's no hope for you anymore. Max didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. Instead, he reached into his pocket and calmly pulled out his phone. Who are you calling? Mr. Mackenzie asked, narrowing his eyes. Max, your parents aren't going to be able to save you. The situation is way beyond that. Max ignored him, letting the phone ring. It only rang twice before the line picked up. I have a situation on my hands, Max said into the phone, eyes still fixed on the two adults in front of him. And I need your help. The principal here is threatening me. They're trying to pin the blame for Sam's death on me, and quite a few other things. Do you think you could help resolve this? The principal and Mr. Mackenzie exchanged glances, both wearing amused smirks. They genuinely wondered if Max had finally lost his mind. Did he really think this little performance was going to work? That a phone call would somehow scare them? Desperate people did desperate things, especially when backed into a corner. I believe I can handle it, Aaron replied over the phone. However, for this particular matter, I may need access to some of your funds. Do I have your permission? Do what you have to do, Max said calmly. He ended the call and leaned back in his seat, waiting in silence. The principal and the teacher remained still as well, watching Max with mild curiosity. When nearly a full minute passed and nothing happened, they exchanged another look, this time more smug than before. For a moment there, I thought something might actually happen, Mr. Mackenzie said with a chuckle. BRR, BRR. The sound of the office phone vibrating on the principal's desk cut through the air like a blade. The two men froze, their eyes slowly drifting to the source of the noise. It was the principal's personal office line, one that rarely rang. And somehow, in that moment, the smile on their faces started to fade. The principal reached out to his phone slowly, his hand hesitant. He wondered who could be calling him at a time like this. Perhaps it was just a coincidence. But when he looked at the name on the screen, his heart sank. He immediately answered. Chair Runston. What a surprise to have you on the line, the principal said, his voice already shaky and pitched higher than usual. Because the person he was speaking to was none other than the chair of the National Teaching Board, the governing body responsible for overseeing all public schools across the country. The board ensured that institutions adhered to proper standards and discipline. When disciplinary actions were required against staff, teachers, or even headmasters, it was the board that made the final decisions. In the case of public schools, they were also responsible for issuing funding, performance bonuses, and determining administrative placements. And the chair, Runston, was the head of that very board. As far as education went, there was no one higher up the ladder, which explained why the principal's tone had changed so dramatically the second he picked up the call. But what truly unsettled him, what sent a chill down his spine, was the fact that this incident hadn't even been made public yet. The students hadn't been dismissed. The investigation was still internal. The parents had no idea what had occurred. The entire matter was still very much being kept within the school. So why was the chair calling now? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Only the principal's voice could be heard as he spoke into the phone, and several times, he audibly gulped. But sir, we've yet to run a full investigation on the matter, and we have— Yes, sir, yes, sir. He continued, nodding nervously until the call finally ended. Slowly, the principal placed his phone back on the desk, his hands trembling slightly. What was that about? Why did the chair call? Mr. Mackenzie asked, his voice confused and uneasy. But the principal didn't respond. Instead, he moved out from behind his chair, walked to Max's side, and, after a moment of hesitation, he dropped to his knees and lowered his head firmly onto the floor. I apologize for everything I said. I apologize for it all, the principal shouted. Please forget everything that happened and allow me to keep my job. I promise, no matter what, anything you want done at this school, it will be yours. Mr. Mackenzie was left speechless. His mouth hung open wide, stunned. Never in his entire career had he seen the principal on his knees like this. He was the one who used to make other faculty members apologize to him, and now here he was doing this in front of a student. Sir, you can't be doing that, Mr. Mackenzie said in a panic. Shut up, the principal snapped. If you want to keep your job and not end up plastered all over the news, then I suggest you get down here as well. Now, Mr. Mackenzie wasn't sure what was going on, but he quickly dropped to his knees, mimicking the principal's posture as he bowed beside him. Seeing the two of them like this, groveling, after having been so smug, could only bring a smile to Max's face. Just then, he felt his phone vibrate. Glancing at the notification, he saw the message. Minus 500,000. I wonder what he did with that amount of money to get this kind of reaction, Max thought. One thing's for sure, Aaron is certainly proving himself useful. As the principal and the teacher nervously looked up at Max, too many thoughts swirled in their minds. Who is this kid? How did he manage to get the chair on his side? The principal thought, his forehead still pressed to the floor. No, not just on his side. It was almost as if the chair worked for him. But he's just a regular student, right? He has to be. Who is this kid? I bet you're thinking all sorts of things right now, Max said as he stood up and began pacing around the room. But you're not going to find your answers. Instead, I want you to do exactly what you said before. First, answer my questions. Why did you want to pin the blame on me? Did someone order you to do it? Max asked. It was clear to him now he was being targeted at this school. There were too many signs pointing to it, and now that the teachers had shown they were willing to take part, he feared they might be connected to something bigger. No one, the principal answered. It was Teacher Mackenzie's idea. With everything that happened at the school, the police were going to get involved. We wouldn't have been able to protect ourselves, so it was just easier to blame it all on you. Max was surprised by the honesty, but it wasn't the answer he was really looking for. So, Mr. Mackenzie, Max said, turning to him, why the suggestion? You seemed awfully quick to offer it. On top of that, you did nothing about what happened to Sam. His voice grew colder. When the police came, why didn't you tell them the truth? Why didn't anyone tell them the truth? There should have been more than enough evidence to punish them, Max continued. Even if they brought in a top law firm, as long as the teachers were there to back it up. Both the principal and Mr. Mackenzie were visibly nervous, trembling as they sat on their knees. Max noticed a glance from Mr. Mackenzie toward the principal, almost as if he were asking for permission, whether or not he should speak. Max walked over and firmly stepped on the principal's hand. It was me, the principal shouted. I did it. I informed all of the teachers that in situations like these, they should come to me first, that I would decide what action should be taken. I told them not to speak to anyone about what happened to Sam. I knew it would make the school look bad if word got out about what had really been going on here. Max twisted his foot harder, pressing deeper into the principal's hand, making him groan in pain. Mr. Mackenzie couldn't believe what he was witnessing. This is insane, he thought. No student should be able to harm a teacher like this. How is this even happening? Just as Mr. Mackenzie began to rise, ready to step in and teach Max a lesson, the principal cried out in a panic. Stay down, the principal yelled. Why? Max asked. The truth is already out there. It's spread all over the school. If anything, wouldn't it be better for the school to just admit the problem and try to improve from it? If you were a private school, I'd understand protecting your reputation, but this is a public school. So what's the real reason? I was paid, the principal suddenly screamed. At that moment, Max finally lifted his foot off the man's hand. He had suspected something was off the moment he entered the principal's office. The luxury furniture, the expensive decor, it all seemed far beyond what someone in his position should have been able to afford on a public school salary. "And who was it?" Max asked. "Who paid you?" It was Dipter. The student Dipter. The principal confessed, his voice shaky. "What the?" Max muttered, genuinely stunned. That answer had caught him completely off guard. Of all the possibilities, that wasn't the one he expected. A 17-year-old student bribing the principal? Even in all his years working in the underworld, Max had never heard of anything like this. Not from someone that young, and certainly not in a school like this. He took a breath and then gave his next demand. "Then I want the same rules they've been getting," Max said coldly. "From this point on, no matter what I do, no matter how far I go, you sweep it under the rug." "Got it." The principal was now back in his seat while Max remained in the office for a little while longer. There were still a few more details that needed to be ironed out between them. Beyond that, Max was also interested in finding out if the principal knew anything else, specifically how a 17-year-old student like Dipter had the kind of money to pay off someone in his position. According to the principal, he was receiving a yearly bonus of $100,000, an amount that, apparently, was enough to buy his silence and cooperation. Sure, to Max, with the full financial power and influence of the Stern family behind him, that kind of money wasn't exactly shocking. It explained how he'd been able to reach people even higher up the ladder than the principal. Still, the idea of a fellow student casually spending that much raised more questions than answers. What stood out most, however, was how the principal refused to question any of it. His silence wasn't out of professionalism, it was rooted in fear. He was afraid of why a teenager would go to such lengths to secure freedom within a school, and even more afraid of whoever might be backing Dipter from behind the scenes. Regardless, the outcome was in Max's favor now. He would enjoy the same privileges. No matter what happened at school, what messes he created or how far he went, the administration would do its best to bury it. Just like they had done with Dipter. Honestly, I probably could have just relied on Aaron for this, Max thought to himself. But I wonder, is there a line he wouldn't cross? Something even he would consider too unethical? "Are you sure about what you're doing?" the principal asked again. "You really want to stay in this school after everything that's happened? I'm telling you, expelling you might be the best option for everyone. We won't get the police involved if that's what you're worried about. These aren't normal kids we're dealing with." Yes, Max waved them off dismissively, as if it were no big deal. "Just remember, it's important that you continue playing your part. Keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Keep taking your bribes. I don't want them getting suspicious or asking too many questions. If I had to guess, I'd say the students don't want this escalating any further either, right? Dipter Co. All of them would rather sweep this under the rug, as long as I stay quiet. If I don't get the police involved, and they don't, it's a win for everyone." The principal couldn't deny that. Max was absolutely right. The students wanted this incident forgotten just as much as the school did. "Just tell them you managed to talk me down with a simple threat that I agreed not to speak out in exchange for some leniency," Max continued. "And as for the hospital bills, you can tell their families to forward all medical expenses to me. I'll cover them. That way, their parents won't have anything to complain about either." The principal and Mr. McKenzie had to admit it felt like the situation was finally resolving itself, with no one getting into further trouble and no one getting hurt more than they already had. Still, they couldn't shake the worry. How much deeper could this school sink now that it had come to this? Meanwhile, Max was pleased with the outcome. There were two reasons he hadn't acted rashly before. The first was his body. He wasn't in the same condition as his old body. He was lucky he could even fight as well as he had. The classroom fight had proven that. If Joe hadn't stepped in to help him, Max would have lost that battle. Going up against Dipter and the rest of the school on his own wasn't a good idea. Not then, and certainly not now. Not with his current strength. The second reason was the risk of getting expelled. He didn't know just how far the Stern family's influence reached, and what sort of consequences might follow. But pushed to the edge of his patience and anger, he had called Aaron, and it had worked. Now, he was in a position where, at the very least, He didn't have to worry about this anymore. All right, I'll leave this here for you. For the hospital bills, Max said, placing a card with a number written on it onto the desk. It wasn't his own number, but Aaron's. Just then, the bell rang, signaling the end of the period and the start of the next. I guess I should be getting back to class, Max added with a small grin. It's going to be a lot easier and a lot quieter. With that, he turned to leave. But just as he reached for the door handle, Mr. McKenzie called out from behind him. Wait, Max, he said, how were you able to do all of this? I mean, if you could have done this the whole time, why did you go through all of that? Who are you? Max paused, his hand still on the door, and answered without looking back. That's what I'm trying to find out as well. With those words, he opened the door and walked back into the hallway. The students Max had injured were being taken for further checkups at the local hospital, thanks to his generous offer to cover all their medical expenses. Oddly enough, most of the delinquents seemed pleased with this. Despite being sore and bruised, they essentially got a free day off school and weren't going to complain. Well, most of them, anyway. The few with broken fingers, and especially those with holes in their hands, might have preferred sitting through class instead. As Max walked through the hallways, every student's gaze was fixed on him. A noticeable number of them even moved aside to clear the path, pressing themselves against the walls. Now, this reminds me of when I was back in school, Max thought, suppressing a laugh, until suddenly someone grabbed his hand and pulled him to the side. Turning around, he was met with the familiar sight of a woman's back. What the this again? Max muttered under his breath as he was dragged into an empty classroom. The door shut firmly behind them. Do you do this a lot? Max asked, now face to face with his ex-fiancée, Sherry. What happened to you? Sherry questioned, her eyes wide with concern. Did you get hit so hard that it completely changed your personality? I saw what you did. How were you even able to do all of that? Max didn't have a convenient answer. He could have said he had been secretly training, but what was the point of even speaking with his ex-fiancée? Hadn't she already cut him out of her life? With that thought, Max decided to stay silent. He turned toward the door, reaching for the handle. Wait, Max, I'm worried about you. Sherry called out. Please tell me, you didn't use any of the money, did you? Max's hand froze on the door handle. She knows about the money. Max, you didn't use the money, did you? She asked again, more urgency in her voice this time. Sherry Kurtz, Max's ex-fiancée with a failing family business, was the only person who knew Max's true identity. That he wasn't Max Smith, but instead a member of the Stern family. A family with immense power and wealth, the kind that most people couldn't accumulate even across several lifetimes. Despite all this, Aaron had informed him that the only people aware of the current race to choose the next heir were the candidates themselves. Of course, the heirs could tell anyone they wished about their inheritance or the Stern fortune, but Max was confident Sherry didn't know about any of that. After all, Sherry had apparently left Max to chase after one of the other heirs, hoping she could secure some of their money to save her family business. Max believed that the relationship between him and his ex-fiancée must have ended poorly. Otherwise, why wouldn't Max have helped her out financially? At one point, Max did think that Sherry's presence at the school might be valuable, that he could potentially gain some information from her. Perhaps she knew what had happened to him the day he ended up in the hospital. It had quickly become apparent, just from attending school, that Coe and Dipter, both names on the list, were the ones Max needed to keep an eye on. Because of that, Sherry had quickly become irrelevant, someone he no longer needed to pay attention to, until now. Because she clearly knew about the money they had. So he was close enough with her to tell her about it, which means she'll also know why he never used it. Max, Sherry called out again. Answer me. Did you finally give in? Did you finally use the money? You know what happens if you do. You held out for so long. That was the one good trait you had. Now Max found himself at a clear crossroads. He could tell her that he had used the money and cut the conversation short, but doing so might lead him to find out nothing. Or he could ask her why he wasn't supposed to use the money at all, but that would likely raise even more questions than answers. So in this situation, there's really only one thing I can do, Max thought. I have to tell her the truth. She's not one of the heirs. And if the Real Max trusted her enough to share this information, then maybe she's not as bad a person as I thought. Aaron, I hope this doesn't cause more trouble for you. Sherry, there's something I need to tell you. Something that might explain why I've been acting strangely. Max went on to explain to Sherry that he had amnesia. He told her how he had woken up in the hospital with no memory of what had happened. Everything was gone, to the point that he didn't even remember anyone at school or the fact that he was part of the Stern family. It was hard for her to believe at first, but what convinced her was how completely different Max was acting, like he was a completely different person altogether. Of course, Max didn't tell her the whole truth, that he was actually a man in his late 30s who had been murdered, possibly by members of his own gang, and had woken up in the body of one of the richest people in the world. "I didn't even know you were in the hospital," Sherry said, her voice soft. For the first time, Max saw what looked like genuine concern on her face. "Well, there goes that. I was hoping she could at least tell me what happened there, but I guess not. The thing is, I didn't even know you knew about the money. My grandfather only recently told me about it, but it was all left untouched, and I had no clue why." Immediately, Max noticed Sherry biting her fingernail, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Why?" Max asked. "Why hadn't I used the money? Why didn't I just leave this school, with everything that was happening to me?" "Damn it," Sherry said, slamming her foot on the ground. "This whole thing is so stupid. I was surprised too. Our family has been in trouble for a while. I'm sure you know that. That's why I ended up here. I left private school and came to this one. I was here before even you arrived. When you transferred here, I was shocked. We were still engaged at the time, but we'd only met a few times. I asked you what was going on, and you wouldn't tell me, at least not right away. I'd see you walking down the halls with bruises on your face. I heard the names they called you, and worse. I couldn't stand it. And then, to make it even more confusing, I saw you were using a fake name. None of it made any sense. I asked again, what was happening to you? I knew what had happened to your parents, but everything else felt ridiculous. So I told you I would go to your grandfather. My family, even though we were going through tough times, still had some connections with him." Max couldn't help but pull a face. Even though his grandfather could have helped him out, he wasn't that type of person. Still, in this situation, seeing his grandchild like that, Max wondered if he might have stepped in. "You panicked the moment I mentioned it. You were completely alert. And that's when you finally told me the truth about everything. About the contest your family was involved in. It was a crucial detail you had to share because the money, it was part of the reason why you were trapped." Max was waiting. Finally, he would understand what was really going on. Why he hadn't been able to use the money. Why he was stuck in this school. "I'm not sure if you remember her," Sherry began, "but there's someone here you care about a lot, a girl named Abby." Max had already run into Abby a few times. Based on how she reacted to him, it did seem like they were close. "You told me that if you spent even a single penny of that money, they would go after her. Your exact words were, with the amount of money they have, how much do you think it would really cost them to get rid of her?" The answer had finally been revealed to Max. They had been keeping his money hostage. With the threat to someone he cared about looming over his head, depending on how much the original Max truly cared for this person, it was no wonder he never touched the money. After all, this was a kid who had no one, who had already lost his entire family. Maximus knew exactly what that felt like. He had gone through the same thing. The White Tiger Gang and the people around him had been the light he built for himself. Maybe, for the original Max, this Abby girl had been his light. And more than that, Max knew the answer to Sherry's question better than she might have known herself. How easy is it to get rid of someone with the kind of wealth the Stern family has? The answer, very easy. The White Tiger Gang never took hit jobs. Sure, they handled intimidation, broken bones, or did what needed to be done when necessary. But assassinations, killing someone just because a client asked, was a messy business that brought too much heat. Still, Max knew of special groups out there, ones who would take that kind of job without a second thought. And with the kind of wealth the Stern family possessed, eliminating someone wouldn't even register as a noticeable expense. "For what you told me," Sherry continued, "they were the ones who forced you to come to this school. Apparently, you knew Abby from some online game the two of you used to play. They found out, and they wanted you to witness firsthand the kind of mess this school was. To see what could happen to her if you ever tried to use the money. You were forced to live this life because of that threat." There was now a clear question at the forefront of Max's mind, one he needed an answer to. Who was it? Max asked. Who told me not to use the money? It's obvious. It was one of the others, one of my family members. They're the only ones who know I have access to those funds. And they're the only ones who wouldn't want me to use them, because using that money would take me out of this ridiculous race. So which one of them was it? But there were still more questions swirling around in Max's mind. Why did they see him as a threat? Maybe it wasn't even personal. Maybe someone simply wanted to increase their odds. In a competition like this, taking out just one person could shift the balance. And this was the quickest way to do it. But they had even gone as far as making sure he ended up in the hospital, possibly even wanting him dead. I don't know. Sherry answered, her head lowered. You would never tell me, no matter how many times I asked. But it's clear it's someone else from your family. This damn kid, Max thought angrily. He's not making it easy to figure out who I should avoid and who I shouldn't, but thanks to Sherry, I'm getting a clearer picture. Max had been unable to use the money because the threat was coming from his own family, a member who had access to the same resources and power he did. If he had hired security or personnel to protect Abby, they could have just hired someone else to attack her. Even with the trick he had pulled with the principal, it was something another family member could have easily done too. Alone in that situation, it would have been far too much for any kid to shoulder. That's likely why the real Max had decided it was better not to use the money at all. Dipter, he's the one everything is funneling toward. If I can get to him, I'll finally get my answers. Because of the way I've used the money, I doubt the family even knows I've touched it, which is good, but confirming that someone from my own family is after my life, that's not exactly a comforting thought. Thank you for telling me everything, Max said as he headed toward the door. It's been bothering me for a long time, and I think I've finally cleared my head. Wait, Max, Sherry called out, grabbing hold of his forearm. What are you going to do? After what you did today, I'm scared. They might not even care that you've used the money. Max smiled. Then the answer is simple, isn't it? The threat in this school is Dipter, so I get rid of him. If he's gone, the problem's gone. And as long as I do it with my own hands, it shouldn't attract too much attention. Sherry's grip tightened as she heard Max's answer. She had seen how he fought, but Dipter and his gang of delinquents were too much for any one person to handle. And there was still another looming concern. And what about Abby? She asked. Even if you manage to take them down, what if they use her against you to make you stop? Max then shook his arm, forcing Sherry to let go of him. It was a rough motion, enough to make her step back in surprise. Abby is not someone I know, Max said coldly. She's not my problem to deal with. What? Sherry shouted, stunned. We're talking about Abby. You constantly talked about her. She was the reason why I called off our engagement. Her voice trembled as she went on. I knew you had feelings for her. The way you endured everything, never once touching the money, it was the one trait I actually admired about you. I know you care about that girl. I know you'd do anything for her. Max turned back toward her as he placed his hand on the door handle. He opened it slowly, pausing just enough to glance back at her over his shoulder. That wasn't me who cared about her. Inside the principal's office, a private meeting was taking place. Seated comfortably in the principal's chair with his legs propped up on the desk was none other than Dipter. Standing nervously off to the side, sweating and tense, was the actual principal himself. Are you stupid, old man? Dipter said, his voice sharp with irritation. You decided to sweep all of this under the rug? For the sake of your job? Pretend none of it happened. Do you even understand the situation you're in? Dipter said, his tone sharp and mocking. It's not just about the money I've been bringing you, or your job. Principal, you're now a hardened criminal. You can't just take bribes from a student and turn a blind eye to everything that happens here. If anyone finds out what you've done, you're not just getting fired, you're going to prison. And trust me, I'm sure I could dig up plenty of other things on you too. Without hesitation, Dipter pressed the end of his cigarette right onto the principal's polished desk, leaving a blackened burn mark. But don't worry, Dipter said casually. It seems I was wrong about what they really wanted for him. He leaned back with a grin. Turns out, the best move is to keep him in this school. That way, we can monitor him, control him. I actually came here to give you that update. If we can't get him sent to juvie, then don't expel him. Let him stay. Just then, Dipter's phone buzzed in his pocket. He took it out and glanced at the screen. "Oh, look at that. Our client's calling," he said with a smirk, answering the phone. The students who had ended up in the hospital didn't return for the day, leaving Max's classroom noticeably empty. Several seats sat vacant, and yet Max could still feel nearly every pair of eyes on him. Some students silently wondered how he was even allowed to remain at school, but most had convinced themselves it wasn't Max's fault. Surely the teachers must have seen it that way too. Why else would he still be here? Still, after witnessing what he had done, their nerves were on edge. Every time Max so much as moved in his seat, stood up, or turned his head, others would twitch or flinch instinctively. Max had even noticed how, when he walked past other students' desks, they would become oddly possessive over their pencils, either slipping them back into their cases or pushing them far out of reach, away from Max entirely. "This is good," Max thought as he rested his head on the desk and closed his eyes. "Now I don't have to focus on school or deal with anything. I could just rest." It was clear to everyone that Max was completely checked out, sleeping in the corner of the classroom, not paying attention to a single thing. Some of the students were even pointing it out to Mr. McKenzie using hand signals, too afraid to speak in case they accidentally woke Max up. Yet, Mr. McKenzie chose to leave him alone, acting as if Max wasn't even there. Finally, the bell rang, signaling the end of the day, and Max was free to head home. He turned around and glanced back at the school building. "I have a feeling things are going to start changing tomorrow. Now that I've made my move, it's bound to ruffle some feathers around here. I need to prepare as much as I can with the time I have." For Max, that meant heading to the gym once more to stay sharp, keep his edge, and work out exactly what moves he could make without alerting the family member watching him or having the entire school turn on him. To get back into the shape he was in before, it would take him at least 6 months. Max's instincts were right. As night fell and the city lights took over, movements were already underway in the background. Downtown, in a lively streets brimming with energy, bars, restaurants, pool halls, karaoke lounges, and all kinds of youth-centered entertainment buzzed with life. The majority of people in the area were university students, so Dipter and his 2 companions, Jay and Snide, blended in perfectly. That's when they spotted the place they were looking for, the Cube. It was a nightclub that was impossible to miss at night, with a giant Rubik's Cube protruding from its front facade. Well known as one of the most popular clubs in the area, it had a reputation for drawing in large crowds. Even now, at 10 p.m. on a weekday, not even a Friday, the queue outside stretched down the street. That alone was a testament to the venue's popularity. But for Dipter and his friends, they walked straight past the velvet rope, heading directly to the entrance. "What the heck? Who do they think they are, just skipping the line like that?" one man muttered from the queue. Immediately, Dipter turned to look at the man and offered nothing but a smirk. As he moved forward, the 2 bouncers at the door nodded in acknowledgement, allowing him through without a word. "Make sure that guy never gets in ever again," Dipter said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "He should learn to mind his own business." The man in the queue clearly heard every word, and his friends began to protest. "What are you saying that for? We were already at the front of the line," one of the girls complained. Of course, if they're walking straight to the front, the bouncers wouldn't stop them unless there was a real issue. His friends gave the man a hard time, even though he was just venting his frustrations aloud. As Dipter entered the club, the interior was dimly lit and still mostly empty. People were only just starting to arrive. Red lights scanned over certain areas of the room, casting eerie shadows, but Dipter knew exactly where he was headed. The 3 of them made their way upstairs to the 2nd floor, where a private room with a glass booth awaited them. Upon entering, they noticed several men and women in suits scattered around the room, their presence adding a distinct air of importance. One man stood alone, his back turned to the others as he looked out through the glass window at the club below. Due to the low lighting, it was hard to make out even the color of his clothes. Dipter took a seat alongside the other 2 and waited, as they usually did. "Let's start with the good news first," the man said, still not turning around. "I heard you've been able to expand the product into several new areas. Now that you're pushing into different territories, have you run into any problems yet?" There was the usual mess here and there, but we dealt with it quickly, Dipter said casually. But I'm guessing that's not why you called us in for a personal meeting, just because of that. No, the man replied instantly. I want to ask you a question. Am I not paying you guys enough? You're paying us more than enough, Dipter answered without hesitation. Immediately, the man turned around. Then why the hell am I hearing that there are problems? He screamed, flinging the beer bottle in his hand across the room. It flew right past Dipter's face, smashing into the wall behind him. Despite the close call, Dipter didn't flinch. He remained calm as the man stood visibly fuming, his chest rising and falling rapidly with rage. Do you really see it as a problem? Dipter replied coolly. He's in the same position he was in from the beginning. He's no threat, but judging by how you're acting, you must be at least a little worried about him. So, I'll ask, what exactly do you want us to do? Without a moment of hesitation, the man raised his hand and pointed directly at the three of them. I want you to get rid of this headache. Do whatever it takes to deal with him. Use whatever method, whoever you need. I never want to hear that name again, the man barked. I don't even care if you kill him. Just eliminate the problem, or I'll get rid of all of you. Hearing those words, Dipta stood up, and the other two followed suit. Very well, Dipta said coldly. If you want me to act, then I'll act. Just make sure you don't end up regretting your words. With that, he turned and left the room, already preparing himself for tomorrow. After a good workout, Max had returned to his apartment. He rested well, knowing that the troubles at school had now lessened. There were two things he needed to sort out, the issue with the money and the White Tiger Gang. Now that he had begun to unravel the reason why he couldn't use the money, he was getting close to finally using it to further his goal, getting back at the White Tiger Gang and uncovering who had betrayed him. Being in a weak body, the only real advantage he had was his status as a member of the Stern family and the immense wealth at his fingertips. But if he couldn't access that wealth, then he was just a regular, powerless high school student. It would still take time for him to regain his strength. So in the meantime, he had no choice but to handle the issues at school. Before heading out, Max checked his phone and saw that he had received a message. Green Ranger, Co. and most of the students won't be coming to school today. Seems like it's an order from Dipter. Not that I think any of them are in the condition to do anything. P.S. I don't think I'll be able to give you much more information after this. It seems I was even sent this text by accident. None of the others are going to talk to me anymore because I helped you out. Remember what I did? And can you at least save my name as Red Ranger? Why green? Having Joe as part of the group had been helpful for gathering some information, but he was still too low on the ladder to provide anything truly valuable. Still, Max appreciated what he had done. Thanks for the tip, Green Ranger. Max replied. While heading to school, Max found his mind preoccupied with one particular person, Abby. The girl who was essentially holding the old Max's money hostage. There's a chance Abby might know more about what's going on, but I doubt it, Max thought. If the real Max cared about her that much, I don't think he would have told her anything. Nothing about who he really was, nothing about the situation he was in either. At least, that's what I would have done. And besides, even if she did know which family member was behind all of this, asking her for information has a chance of getting her in trouble. And now that I've decided to do what needs to be done, it feels wrong to drag her into this. Before I make any real moves, I need to secure my main environment first. Arriving at school, the classroom was just as quiet as the day before, which was all good news for Max as he made his way to his usual corner seat. He sat down, going through his lessons, either waiting for Dipter to make his move or thinking about what his next step should be. Come to think of it, I don't even know what Dipter looks like, Max realized. What Max didn't know, however, was the movement unfolding throughout the school, and all of it was converging on him. Meanwhile, Dipter was standing on the school rooftop for a change. He was looking down at a section of the building where he could peer through the windows and into the classrooms. It's time for me to do what I'm paid to do, Dipter said as he hit send on his phone. Across every classroom, regardless of the year group, a message was sent out to several students. The heads of each class's delinquents, their underlings, all of them received it. Some pulled out their phones under the desk, while others didn't bother hiding them at all. The teachers had long since stopped caring enough to scold them. One by one, the students read the message, and once they did, Smiles began to spread across their faces. A few even snickered quietly to themselves. In one of the classrooms, Jay Woods had received the message too. His eyes widened the moment he read it, and a troubled, uneasy expression appeared on his face. Haha, did you get the message too? Jay overheard some of the students near him whispering. Yeah, it's been a long time since we've done something like this. Well, I guess he's getting what's coming to him. Don't you think it's a bit much? All of this just for one guy. You saw what Mad Max did, didn't you? He's not normal. We need to send a message to remind people not to go against the order. Some of the kids in the classrooms are already getting cocky after seeing what happened. Right, they think they can pull another Mad Max. I had one kid grab a pencil, so I shoved the damn thing right back in his mouth. When nothing had happened during break or lunch, Max was quite pleased. No one had acted out, and he was able to eat in peace and spend most of his day ignoring the lessons without interruption. This was the kind of school life he had somewhat expected, quiet enough so he could focus on dealing with the white tiger mess in the background. If things continue like this, it might actually be better to wait until my body's in better condition before going after Dipter. If it were just the two of us in a fight, maybe I could manage something. But I doubt it'll ever be that simple. Maybe, since I'm still young and stuck in this weaker body, I should learn how to use a weapon. I was too stubborn in the past, relying only on my fists, but mastering a weapon could make all the difference now. Max hadn't even realized how deep he'd been lost in thought about his current situation until the final bell of the day had already rung. It was the end of the day, and for the first time in a long time, it had ended without a single incident. As Max walked over toward the door, he slid it open, only to find a large student standing right in front of him. The guy was built like a brick wall. Max looked up, staring at the towering figure's face. You need to follow me. It's Dipter's orders, Jay Woods said. Max continued to stare up at the mountain of muscle standing in front of him. The student was the kind of person one would have a hard time believing wasn't already a full-grown adult. It was exactly the type of person Max knew he wasn't ready to face yet. Guys like this, huge, experienced delinquents, were always the toughest to fight. Even with Max's skills and experience, larger opponents were harder to take down. And considering the student had mentioned Dipter's name, Max could tell this guy wasn't just muscle, he could fight too. Damn, is that Jay Woods? One of the nearby students whispered. Crap, Max is done for. I knew he overdid it recently. Looks like they're really going after him now. Thanks to the students' whispers, Max now had a name to go with the face, Jay Woods. Do I have a choice in this? Max asked. If I try to leave, are you going to stop me? Jay looked down at him, his expression stone cold. Unreadable. It's best if you follow me, he said, unless you want them to go after the girl. It was a good thing that certain events had unfolded in a particular order. Up until yesterday, Max wouldn't have known who the girl they were referring to even was. He considered trying to shove past Jay and make a run for it down the hall, or perhaps agree to go with him and escape later. But there was one thought that kept sticking in his mind, Sam. Sam's life had been drastically altered because of Max's actions. And now, there was a very real chance the same could happen to Abby. It's okay, it'll be all right. Because at the end of this, I still have something to use. If I can't get out of a tough situation, I have a lifeline. Max gave a small nod, and immediately, Jay started moving. The two of them began walking down the hallway together. Don't run off, Jay said. I'm faster than I look, and doing that will only bring more trouble for everyone. Although Max wasn't planning to run, he knew he still needed contingencies because right now, his only lifeline was his phone. He pulled out, and while Jay glanced over, he didn't say anything. He had already given his warning. Green, can you give me some information on Jay Woods? It didn't take long for a message to come back. Holy crap, they sent Jay Woods after you. Good luck. Knowing you'll need it. No, but seriously, that guy's a monster. I didn't think they'd escalate things this far, just because you beat up Ko. No one even liked Ko. He was like that annoying little brother in every story who always gets captured or something. Anyway, he's strong, really strong. Don't fight him if you can help it. The messages only confirmed what Max had already suspected. And what made things worse was the realization that they were now heading outside of the school grounds. As they walked down the streets, Max kept track of their route, and it became clear that they had arrived at the entrance of a construction site. This is way too well planned. This Dipta guy knows exactly what he's doing, Max thought. A construction site still in its early stages. There won't be any security cameras. And if someone like Dipter can afford to pay off the principal, getting a few construction workers or guards to take the day off. Easy. As expected, they were able to walk straight through the barrier without a single person in sight. They continued walking until Max eventually came to a halt. Up ahead was an empty building. It looked like the bare skeleton of an unfinished apartment complex. The pillars were in place, but the outer walls hadn't been constructed. If I walk in there, I'll be walking straight into my own death, Max muttered. Jay turned around to face him. We only want to talk, he replied calmly. If we wanted to beat you up or get rid of you, we could have done it back at school. Nothing stopped us before, and nothing will stop us now. The group still believed they had the principal completely under their thumb, so the logic made sense. But something about the whole situation didn't sit right with Max. If they really wanted to talk, why not just do it at school? A simple conversation at school wasn't possible. Max asked. This isn't a school matter, Jay replied. It's personal, and personal things need to be handled outside of school grounds. Max, you won't lose your life. I can promise you that, he added. We're just students, all trying to live our lives and get by. This isn't personal, it's just business. And I'm not in the business of killing other students. The words spoken by Jay felt surprisingly genuine. Maybe it was because of all the years Max had spent in the underworld that he was taking these events a little too seriously. As Jay said, they were students, high school bullies. For them to go as far as murder, that wasn't something easy to do or typical of people their age. Max took a deep breath and walked forward, entering the construction site. That's when he saw a single person sitting on a chair, turned backward. He was relatively small, with a strange, creepy smile stretched across his face. Is that Dipto? Max wondered. It wasn't at all how he had imagined him. Soon after, Max found himself standing in the middle of the empty space, while Jay walked over to the seated figure's side. Max, I don't think the two of us have officially met, the person said. My name's Snide, but I'm sure you already knew that. I'm here on behalf of Dipter, Snide continued. He asked me to call you here for a little meeting, you see. We saw the video, what you did to Ko, and we have to admit, we were impressed. So we're here to ask, would you like to join us? And let me add one more thing. If you do, I promise you, you'll obtain wealth beyond your imagination. The last line that came out of Snide's mouth nearly made Max burst out laughing. He had to lower his head slightly, pretending to study the floor, so Snide wouldn't catch the grin threatening to stretch across his face. Make more money than I could ever dream of? Max thought, if there's one person in the world you shouldn't say that to, it's me. Oh, if only you knew just how much this kid is worth. Pushing the smirk away and composing himself, Max slowly raised his head again. Because, honestly, the offer on the table was pretty interesting. Unexpected, but interesting. To join you, Max repeated, his voice steady, almost curious. And what exactly does that mean? Am I joining you too, Jay and Snide? Or are we talking about something bigger, like joining Dipter? He paused for just a second before leaning in slightly. Or maybe it's someone else altogether. Whoever it is you're really working for. It was a loaded question, and Max knew it. But it was important. If this offer was coming straight from Dipter, that was one thing. But if it came from someone higher up, someone pulling strings from the shadows, then Max needed to know. Because that meant they weren't acting on their own. It meant this whole situation was deeper than it looked on the surface. Snide's shoulders began to shake, a low chuckle escaping through his teeth like he was trying, and failing, not to laugh. Oh, I like you, Snide replied with a sly grin. Makes me wonder if you've always been like this. Not many in our group think things through or fight the way you do. He leaned back a bit, casually waving his hand through the air. When I say join us, I mean exactly that, this little unit here. Maybe Dipter's included in that, maybe not. Who knows? But what we got going on, it's smooth. Real smooth. Something no student from any other school could even dream of touching. Snide's grin widened, but there was a glint in his eye, like he knew he was dangling something irresistible in front of Max. I can't get into all the details just yet, since, you're not exactly with us. But I can tell you this, it's lucrative. Very lucrative. Max held back a sigh. So much for the dramatic villain monologue, he thought. Where's the part where they spill their whole master plan, brag about their empire, and give away all the juicy details? No such luck. Instead, Max decided to push a little further. And why exactly do you want me to join you? He asked, keeping his tone calm. You guys seem strong enough already, and I'm pretty sure not everyone will be thrilled about me being on your team. Especially the one person backing this whole operation, someone from the Stern family. The irony was almost laughable. Snide and the others clearly had no idea who Max really was. And that could either be the greatest advantage of all, or the most dangerous. Haha, you might be right about that, Snide chuckled, tilting his head with amusement. As expected, you're smarter than everyone gives you credit for. You figured out you were being targeted, didn't you? Makes me wonder what it is about you. But honestly, that's even more reason for you to join us. He leaned forward slightly, like he was about to let Max in on a secret. See, Dipter gave me one job. Make sure you're no longer a problem. But if you join us, then that's problem solved. Nice and clean. For both sides, I think. Snide paused, biting his lip like he was debating whether to continue. Then that mischievous grin returned. And on top of that, maybe I shouldn't say, he teased, a snicker already escaping his lips. Ah, screw it. I'll tell you. Doesn't really matter whether you join or not. Our client's been arrogant for far too long. Dipter's sick of taking orders, so he's planning something big. He wants to take over everything, all of the operations our client runs. Soon, it won't matter what that client wants. It'll all belong to Dipter. Max's expression didn't change, but Jane noticed it, the subtle tension that ran through his body, the way his fists clenched tight at his sides. Something in that last part had hit a nerve. You're planning on betraying your client? Max asked quietly, but inside his thoughts were spiraling. The Cubs. Memories flashed of all the people he had protected, trained, fought alongside. His so-called family. And someone among them had betrayed him too. He wondered if the ones who betrayed him in the past had sat through conversations just like this. Charming offers layered with lies. The thought twisted in his gut, sitting heavy and wrong. I'll make you a deal, Max said, steadying his voice. You tell me who this client of yours is, the one who put the target on my back, and I'll consider joining you. After all, you said it wouldn't matter, right? Snide's grin didn't falter, but a mocking tone slid into his voice. Oh, do you really think you're in a position to negotiate? He asked, laughing under his breath. I've already told you more than I should have. And just so we're clear, I was given a very simple job by Dipter. Make sure you're no longer a problem. He raised 2 fingers, and there are 2 ways to handle that. Max didn't flinch. He'd already made his decision the second Snide opened his mouth. With a slow, deliberate motion, Max lifted his hand and flipped him the middle finger. F***CKU, Max said coldly. You backstabbing cowards. I'd rather rot than work with people like you. Snide's smirk widened. I was really hoping you'd say that. From the shadows and the upper floors, the sound of footsteps echoed. Loud, rhythmic closing in. Max's eyes darted around, and then he saw them. Dozens of students stepping out from behind pillars, stairwells, and the half-built ledges above. All of them were from his school. All of them were delinquents. And not a single one of them came empty-handed. Some held bike chains, others gripped metal or wooden baseball bats, and a few had pocket knives glinting in the low light. Every single one of them looked like they'd walked straight out a nightmare version of high school. In total, there had to be at least 50 students forming a wide, tight circle around the skeletal building. There was no path out, no alley to slip through, no gap to squeeze by. Just 50 weapons and 50 pairs of eyes locked on a Max. 50 to 1. No escape. Maybe I should have trusted my instincts, Max thought, biting down on a bitter laugh. Thinking high school delinquents wouldn't go as far as the real criminals I knew. These kids might actually be worse. Where are the parents? The teachers? How is this the world we live in? Snide stepped forward slightly, arms loose at his sides, eyes watching Max like a vulture circling prey. So, do you care to change your answer? Max didn't blink. Instead, he slowly pulled off his school blazer, wrapped it tightly around his left arm, building up the fabric until it looked like a makeshift shield. "There's a rumor about me," he said, lifting his chin. Well, it wasn't really a rumor. His voice carried across the silence, heavy and sharp. "You'd need more than 100 people to take me down." Then his eyes snapped to Snide. "So no, my answer's still the same." Max raised his unwrapped arm and gave them the middle finger again. F***CKU. Snide didn't waste a second. "Get him!" The entire ring of students erupted in motion, screaming and charging forward with weapons raised. And even Max, who'd stared death in the face more times than most, felt his pulse spike. This one's going to be tough. Max watched as the sea of students rushed him from all sides. 50 bodies, 50 weapons, one target. Being in the center of the chaos was a death sentence. He knew better than to stand still and wait for the pain to come to him. "No, I have to break through." With a sharp inhale, Max sprinted forward, straight toward one of the groups, catching him off guard. One of the students, wide-eyed and too slow to react properly, swung his bat downward in panic. Max's leg snapped up fast. Crack! His boot connected with the kid's face, lifting his entire body off the ground. The student's grip slackened, the bat clattering to the floor as he crumpled backward. "I have to keep charging forward," Max thought, weaving between bodies. "If I stop, the ones on the sides will collapse in, and it's over." Another student whipped a bike chain toward him, the sharp metal hissing through the air. Max raised his blazer-wrapped arm and caught the hit with a loud clang. The thick padding absorbed most of the damage, the chain wrapping around his arm like a venomous snake trying to sink in. Using the distraction, Max twisted his body, his right arm still free. He slammed his fist into the jaw of the nearest attacker, knocking them back into another student. No time to hesitate. He pivoted and threw a tight elbow into the cheek of the next one, their head whipping to the side as they collapsed. But then, in the corner of his eye, he saw them, the real threats. One of the students came at Max, brandishing a small knife with wild, twitchy hands. But Max didn't hesitate. He surged forward, fearless, smashing his heavily wrapped arm against the student's wrist and knocking the blade off course. In the same motion, his foot shot up, landing a powerful kick straight into the kid's stomach. The attacker folded with a grunt, but Max didn't stop to watch him fall. He dropped to the ground and rolled, scrambling to a more open space, somewhere, anywhere, he could maneuver better. Up on the sidelines, Snide was grinning ear to ear, perched on his seat like a spectator at a private gladiator match. "He's quite the feisty one, isn't he?" he said, his voice practically buzzing with delight. "Watching it on video is one thing, but seeing him in person, this is something else." Jay stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "He knows how to fight," he muttered, the second the crowd closed in. He moved like he'd been through it all before. Jay didn't miss the details others might have. Max wrapping his blazer around his arm. Most would have thought it pointless. But Jay saw it for what it was, instinct, a natural response from someone who'd been through real violence. Someone who had fought weapon-wielding opponents again and again and lived to tell the tale. The same thing Jay saw in the video, he was watching it play out again right now. Max wasn't improvising. He was surviving the way only someone seasoned by chaos could. On the ground, Max kept using the bodies around him to block attacks, shoving stunned students into each other as he fought his way through the chaos. But there was something different this time. Unlike real fighters, these delinquents didn't care who they hit. Even when Max threw one of their own between him and a swinging chain, they didn't stop. The bat cracked against the boy's back. The chain whipped around an ally's shoulder. They didn't hesitate. They just kept swinging. Eventually, Max managed to snag a bat off the ground. Just in time, another student came charging at him, swinging down hard. Max lifted the bat and caught the blow, the metal clashing with a sharp crack. But pain followed right after. Another student had come up behind him and slammed a bat straight into his back. GRRGH. Max gritted his teeth, his body screaming in protest. The impact rattled through his spine, but he didn't stop. He lashed out, slamming his knee into the guy in front of him, landing the blow square between the thighs. As the student crumpled, Max turned, jabbing the end of the bat into another kid rushing in. Then he twisted and smashed it across the face of the one who'd hit him from behind. He wasn't holding back. Every swing had weight, every strike packed with full force. It wasn't about teaching a lesson, it was about surviving. Max fought like his life depended on it, because in his mind, it did. Just like every brutal fight he'd clawed his way through in the past. With a furious shout, Max spun and let the bat fly in a wide arc, slamming into several students who dared to close the distance. Bodies stumbled back, groaning and clutching bruises. The only thing working in his favor right now was how good he actually was. The way he fought made even these delinquents hesitate. Some of them flinched before charging in, second-guessing their chances against the storm that was Max. And that hesitation, that was his only saving grace. Because if they'd all swarmed him at once, if they hadn't been scared, this fight would have been over a long time ago. This isn't good. I'm wearing out. This is getting way too tiring. Max thought, his breaths growing heavier with each second. Luckily, he had managed to reposition himself with his back against one of the few completed walls of the construction site. To most, it might have looked like he'd cornered himself, but Max saw it differently. With the wall behind him, he didn't have to worry about attacks from the rear. Now he could focus every ounce of his strength and attention on the enemies coming from the front. Not far off, Snide was still watching the chaos unfold, casually spinning a small pocket knife in his fingers. Around and around it went, dancing over his knuckles, flipping through his hand, only to land back in his palm. He kept playing with it over and over, never letting it stop. I still can't believe it, Snide said with a smirk. Eyes locked on Max. He was bullied for an entire year since he transferred here. Not once did he fight back. And now he's doing this? Maybe if he'd been born into a different life, he would have been somebody. Snide gave a light shrug, twirling the knife again. Too bad. He was just unlucky. But hey, in the end, this was his decision. Jay, standing at his side, crossed his arms with a furrowed brow. I still don't think we needed to go this far. Max was still fighting, but it was getting harder with every passing second. He managed to block a hit and throw a punch, but each time he did, another blow would land across his face into his ribs, and he could feel his body screaming with pain. From afar, Jay was still watching the chaos unfold, arms folded tightly across his chest. You know, he muttered, either of us could have taken him on ourselves. We could have handled it at school, taught him a lesson, made sure he never stepped out of line again. Snide shook his head, his eyes fixed on Max like a hawk circling its prey. Yeah, but that's not good enough, he replied coolly. We gotta make sure the client doesn't get suspicious about our plans. Keep him happy. Make it look like we're doing what he asked. If we don't take care of this, we risk everything. He finds out what we're really doing, we're done. Back in the fray, Max gripped another bat with trembling hands. He could feel his energy draining fast. He raised it for another swing, but it was weak, so weak that his opponent grabbed it before it could connect. But Max wasn't done. With a roar, he threw his entire body forward, shoving the bat with all his strength and bulldozing his way through the wall of bodies. I have to get out of here. Now, he told himself, chest heaving. He broke through the crowd, finally reaching the other side. Just one step, one sprint. That's all he needed. But then white-hot pain, a stabbing, searing bolt that pierced right through his shoulder. His body jerked, freezing mid-movement. Slowly, Max turned his head and saw it, a knife buried deep into his flesh. His white school shirt quickly turned crimson, the blood soaking through like ink on paper. Perfect hit, Snide said from the distance, standing tall with his arm extended in a follow-through stance, a satisfied smirk on his face. I've been stabbed, Max realized, his vision swimming, the pain taking over. The stinging pain in Max's shoulder, it wasn't exactly a mystery. He had a pretty good idea what had happened. After all, it wasn't the first time he'd been stabbed. And to top it off, it hadn't even been that long ago that he'd been stabbed multiple times already, which was why he couldn't help himself. He turned his head, twisting just enough to get a look at his back, and sure enough, there it was. A blade lodged right into him, confirming his worst thoughts. Tremors rocked through his entire body. his hands beginning to shake uncontrollably. Crap, it's shaking, Max thought, his heart racing faster than it had during the fight. It's not even the pain. Is it because of what happened before? Right before I died? Get a grip. I need to get a grip. Max screamed at himself internally, trying to lock down the rising panic. Across from him, Snide's loud, obnoxious laugh rang out. Ha ha! I knew it would work. Practicing on that wall finally paid off. Did you see that? Nailed him perfectly. Snide beamed, clearly proud of himself. He turned to Jay, hoping to share the moment. But Jay wasn't even looking at him. His cold, emotionless eyes were locked on Max. Not a single hint of amusement on his face. Man, you're as boring as ever, Snide said, rolling his eyes with a scoff. Ah! A sudden loud scream tore through the air, snapping Snide's attention back to Max. One of the students who had been standing in front of Max had crumpled to his knees, both hands desperately cupping his gremlin makers, his face twisted in pure agony. Max had gone for one of his trademark moves, the kind he only used in desperate times. But even with that, there was still a wall of people crowding in front of him. I've never done this before, but there's a first time for everything. Max shouted. Without hesitation, he charged toward the nearest guy, planting his foot firmly onto the hunched-over student's shoulder. Using every ounce of strength he had left, Max launched himself into the air, soaring right over the row of stunned students. As the ground rushed up to meet him, Max didn't even have to think. His body moved on instinct. He tucked in and rolled the moment he hit the floor, trying to absorb the impact. But during the roll, he felt it. The knife lodged in his shoulder, bent sharply to the side, and then slid out, clattering somewhere onto the ground behind him. "Oh, that hurts!" Max screamed internally, pain flashing white across his vision. Still, he forced himself to move. He couldn't afford to stop, letting the adrenaline do its work. Max pushed himself up and sprinted as fast as his legs could carry him. "What are you idiots doing just standing around for? Get him! All of you!" Snide screamed furiously from behind. "And you too, you lump." The students jolted into action, charging after Max, while Jay followed at a calmer but no less determined pace, not far behind. Out walking through the streets for a casual stroll was a well-dressed, short blonde-haired girl. She had just stepped out from the hair salon, feeling fresh, and was lazily window shopping on her way back from the local high street. As she browsed, she held her phone to her ear, chatting easily with her best friend. "Cindy, I can't believe you're even going out on your own after what happened to us last time. Aren't you scared?" Abby asked, her voice full of concern. Abby, in contrast, was currently curled up at home, wrapped tightly in her sheets like a cocoon. She hadn't gone out with Cindy since the last incident, but they still stayed close, chatting on the phone just like they were now. "Come on, I'm not in the city center," Cindy replied, laughing it off. "I just went to our local area. That's all." "That's worse." Abby practically screamed, making Cindy wince and pull the phone away from her ear. "Did you forget what type of school we go to? What they're like in class?" Abby continued. "They're the ones that hang around the streets, too. It's even more dangerous." Cindy rolled her eyes, but smiled anyway. Her best friend could be a little dramatic, but she knew Abby's worry came from a good place. "Come on, I'm not like you," Cindy said with a grin. "I can't just stay at home all day. I need to get out, and that was a one-time thing. Hey, change the subject, though," she added, her voice brightening. "Speaking of dangerous people, I never knew your boyfriend was so dangerous." "Are you talking about Max?" Abby replied, already sensing where this was going. "Yeah, you saw the video, right? I mean, everyone's seen it. Did you know he had that side to him? That he could actually do all of that? I guess he just got pushed too far. If you ask me, all those bullies deserved it, but still, it was kind of shock." "Yeah," Abby answered, her voice soft as she let out an audible sigh. "Honestly, I don't even know if I know who the real Max is anymore. Things just don't feel the same as they did before." "Cheer up." Max finally fought back. Cindy replied, trying to lift the mood. "After what he did, those bullies won't even think about messing with him again. Who knows, he might actually be having the best time of his life right now." FCK, FCK, F***CK. Max cursed under his breath as he kept running. "This might actually be the second worst day of my life." The first being the damn day I died. Max was sprinting like his life depended on it, which, honestly, it kind of did, and he could hear the chaotic stomping of quite a few people chasing after him. In his panic, he had ended up circling around the construction site instead of sprinting straight out like he should have. Luckily, the place was a mess of scaffolding, stacked materials, and half-built walls, creating plenty of obstacles for him to weave through and gain some distance from the mob at his back. Max had done a lot of cardio training over the last week and a half. He knew how important it was, and when your life was hanging by a thread, your body could pull off some pretty insane feats. But there was one big problem. He could feel it, the steady drip of blood coming from his shoulder wound. Why the hell did the knife have to fall out? Max thought, gritting his teeth. If it had stayed in, at least it would have kept some of the bleeding in check. Now I'm leaking like a faucet. I can't even afford to hide somewhere. They'd just find a blood trail and hunt me down. Scanning ahead, Max spotted several exits, one down to his left and another straight ahead. Without hesitating, he angled toward the left, but just as he was about to dart off, a rough hand grabbed him by the collar and hurled him straight to the ground. To his left, Max crashed into a pile of heavy concrete sacks, grunting as dust puffed up around him. Shaking his head, he quickly looked up and froze. Standing there, blocking the path like a literal wall of muscle, was a figure with his back still turned toward him. "Everyone hurry!" the student barked out to the others. He exited out that way. "Find him and chase him down." The pounding of feet grew louder, then slowly faded as the crowd rushed off in the wrong direction. The student stayed there, unmoving, making sure the others were well out of sight. And when he finally turned around, Max got a clear look at his face. "Jay," Max muttered, staring up at him in disbelief. It was completely unexpected. Max hadn't even seen it coming. How Jay had predicted where he'd be and yanked him down to safety. It showed Jay had instincts, real ones. But out of everything, the part that surprised Max the most was that this giant wall of muscle had clearly lied, shouting to throw everyone off, sending the others charging in the wrong direction. Max didn't waste a second. He scrambled to his feet, not daring to linger. Who knew how long it would take for the others to realize they'd been tricked? Still, he had to ask. "What?" Max said, panting. "Why did you help me? You know Dipter's not going to be happy about this." Jay just shrugged, completely casual about it, like none of this was a big deal. "As if you'd be dumb enough to tell them," he said. "And besides, you don't seem like the type to repay a favor like that with betrayal." He spoke so matter-of-factly that Max almost forgot the situation they were in. "I meant what I said back at the classroom," Jay continued. "I really thought they just wanted to talk to you. I had no idea they were planning this, gathering so many people, and with weapons too. If it was just me," Jay said, his voice low, "I would have dealt with it using my fists. What they did back there, it made me sick. I always act based on how I feel, and that didn't feel right. Someone like you, who fights head-on, shouldn't be taken out like that." It was rare, finding someone like Jay. Someone who had his own code, his own morals, and still had the guts to stand by them, even if it meant going against everyone else. For what Max had seen and heard, he actually liked Jay. It was just a shame they were standing on opposite sides. "I'll repay you for this favor," Max said, nodding once as he walked past Jay. There wasn't anything else he could do for now. Hanging around would just drag Jay into even bigger trouble. "If you ever get into any mess, any kind of trouble, come find me. I'll help you however I can." Without another word, Max broke into a sprint, racing down the dim streets. He knew the others would still be combing the area, searching high and low for him. If he wanted to make it out, he had to move fast. Behind him, Jay stayed back, watching him disappear into the night. "You're the one offering to help me, huh?" Jay said under his breath, a small chuckle escaping him. "How could a nobody like you possibly help someone like me?" "But those were some good words, kid. Real good words." Max kept running through the streets, his breath ragged, his legs moving purely on instinct now. He hadn't spent much time in this city, not enough to really know his way around, so he was relying on gut feeling alone to find his way back. He ducked around corners, crossed empty roads, cutting through alleyways without thinking twice. Only when he was sure the coast was clear did he finally pull out his phone. At least with that, he could pull up some directions and map out a route back home. But there was another problem. He could feel it, blood still dripping from his back, slowly but steadily. The wound must have been deep if it was still bleeding like this. And now, with no one chasing him anymore, the adrenaline that had been fueling him was starting to crash hard. His vision blurred at the edges, the world tilting slightly with every step. Damn it! Max cursed under his breath, looking down at the screen. Several missed calls lit up the phone, all from the same contact, the stalker. So much for being some special security team, Max grumbled. My ace up my sleeve ended up being worth nothing after all. In the back of his mind, there was this gnawing feeling, something he hadn't wanted to admit before. A part of him had always suspected it. This whole thing had been a setup. Max wasn't as naive as Jay. He had known from the start there would be trouble. He just hadn't expected it to be this bad. He hadn't expected them to be armed. In his current state, Max knew he had no chance of taking on that many people, armed or not. That was why, in his desperation, he had messaged Aaron. The thing was, in the rush, Max had left out quite a lot of important details. His message had been simple, blunt. Come now. ASAP. No location. No other instructions. Max had just assumed that the phones would have been bugged, that anyone, would be tracking where he was at all times. He even thought that, despite what Aaron had said about there being no security during the weekdays, there would still be some people watching him from the shadows. If not Aaron, then at least some other members of the Stern family, interested in how things were playing out. But clearly, that wasn't the case. With how pathetic the so-called security team had been so far, it was no wonder he had ended up in such a tragic situation. I thought, based on what he did at that party, he was loyal. But I have to remember, Max thought bitterly, for the real Max to have ended up in the hospital in the first place. They had to have gotten to him somehow. And if it were me, Max's thoughts tightened like a noose, the grim realization hitting him square in the chest. The easiest way to get to him is through the people who are supposed to protect him. I have to start thinking that anyone could be an enemy, including Aaron, Max realized grimly. Everything he did at that party, there's a high chance it was all just an act. And if that's true, then this whole situation has turned into an even bigger pain in the ass than my old life ever was. Just then, his phone buzzed again, another incoming call from Aaron. And not just calls, several desperate messages have been sent too. Each one sounded more frantic than the last, all of them begging him to reply, pleading that if he was in trouble, he needed to say something, and that Aaron would get to him as soon as possible. Max stared at the screen, his vision blurring, the messages smearing together into unreadable streaks. I never did get the full story out of him, Max thought, frustration gnawing at him. I was too messed up back then, after Sam's death. I couldn't think straight. The truth was, as much as he hated it, in the state he was in now, could he really afford not to rely on Aaron? His breathing was getting heavier, his strength fading fast. Blood still dripped steadily from the wound in his shoulder. Max stumbled, leaning heavily against the wall to his side just to keep himself standing. He needed a second, a moment to catch his breath, to steady the shaking in his legs, to try and clear his spinning vision. When he looked back at his phone, even that small effort made his head swim. The screen was blurry, the words fuzzy and hard to read. He didn't have much time left to make a decision. Is that you, Max?" a high voice called out. Max lifted his heavy head, blinking through the haze clouding his vision. In front of him stood a blonde-haired woman, her face blurred at first. He squinted, trying to focus, but even then, he had no clue who she was. Still, it was obvious she could see the blood staining his arm, dripping down steadily. "Crap, you really need help," she said, her voice urgent as she quickly pulled out her phone. "You need to call an ambulance, or the police." Seeing her about to dial, Max instinctively reached out a shaky hand and grabbed her wrist, stopping her. "No police," Max muttered through gritted teeth, barely able to keep himself steady. "No, I need to pay them back myself." The woman hesitated for a second, staring at him, weighing his words, and then she gave a small nod. "All right," she said firmly. "No police, but you're coming with me. I can help you out." Cindy slid her phone back in her pocket and moved to his side, ready to support him before he collapsed completely. Max still had no idea who the woman was, and through his blurry vision, he couldn't really make out her face clearly either. But right now, that didn't matter. He was hurt, and he needed help fast. So, letting her guide him, Max found himself being half-dragged to a small local clinic. Given the late hour, it wasn't particularly busy, which was exactly what he needed. Plus, there was another bonus he hadn't expected. Uncle Larry, Cindy shouted as she pushed open the front door. The place was crammed at the front with shop supplies, over-the-counter meds, cough drops, ointments, while the prescription counter sat near the back. Beyond that, there was a small private medical room, meant for quick examinations and minor treatments. If something serious came up, they'd just send you straight to the main hospital. I'm up. I'm up, a man in a white medical coat said, stumbling out from the back room, looking like he'd just been woken up. Cindy, what are you doing here so late? You need pads again or something? Without missing a beat, Cindy grabbed a bottle of cream sitting on a nearby shelf and hurled it straight at the man's head. He barely flinched in time. All right. You definitely need those pads, he said, laughing. Shut up, you sexist pig. Cindy snapped. Then she pointed to Max, who looked like he could collapse any second. Right now, I need your help. Can't you see I brought you a patient? And you drag him here because, what? Students are loaded these days and can pay for my services. Or because the 24-hour hospital was just too far away. Larry asked, raising an eyebrow. Before Cindy could even answer, Max swayed dangerously, his legs giving out beneath him. Larry rushed forward, slipping under Max's arm and propping him up with his shoulder. Guess I don't have much of a choice now, Larry muttered, hauling Max toward the private medical room. He carefully lowered Max onto the small examination bed, making sure he didn't just dump the kid there like a sack of potatoes. His eyes immediately went to the dark blood soaking through Max's shirt. Grabbing a pair of scissors, Larry started cutting through the fabric, layer by layer, until he finally exposed the source of the bleeding. What the? Larry muttered under his breath. The wound was nasty, deep, and not the kind of injury you got from tripping and falling. It was something else entirely, something far worse. What the hell are kids getting up to around here? Larry thought grimly. This isn't playground stuff anymore. Shaking his head, he grabbed his supplies. I need to disinfect this first, then put a few stitches in. It's going to leave a scar, but at least it's in a spot no one usually sees, he whispered to himself as he worked. Meanwhile, outside the room, Cindy was pacing back and forth, tapping her foot anxiously against the floor. She barely noticed when the front door creaked open again and another figure stepped into the clinic. Cindy, Abby called out as she burst through the clinic door, her chest heaving. Is it true? What you said over the phone, that Max is here and he's hurt. Yeah, Cindy nodded, her face turning serious. It was kind of crazy. I just ran into him out on the street. Looked like he was trying to make it home or something. You think it was the guys from school? Maybe they reacted after what happened in his class. I don't know. Abby muttered, hugging herself tightly. All I know is Max has always kept everything bottled up. No matter what he was going through, he never said anything. I feel so useless. How am I even supposed to help him if he won't let me in? Seeing the way Abby's voice was starting to crack, Cindy moved closer and gently rubbed her best friend's back. Abby looked like she was just seconds away from breaking down. It's okay, Cindy said softly. If he's keeping things to himself, he must have a good reason. After seeing what kind of state he was in today, I think I'm starting to understand why. The two girls waited anxiously, standing in the quiet front area of the clinic, until finally the door to the small medical room swung open. Larry stepped out, wiping his hands on a cloth and wearing a tired but reassuring expression. He's going to be fine, Larry said, seeing the panic in their faces. He didn't lose as much blood as it probably looked like. He's mostly just exhausted. Both girls let out the breath they'd been holding. He completely passed out, Larry continued. Even while I was cleaning and stitching the wound, he didn't even flinch. Poor kid must have been running on pure adrenaline until he just couldn't anymore. When I gave him anesthetic, he didn't react at all, Larry said, running a hand through his messy hair. It was almost like nothing in the world could wake the kid up, but he's stable now. Still, Do you have any idea what happened to him? Cindy shook her head quickly. I just found him like that, she said, a hint of guilt in her voice. Larry let out a heavy sigh. Well, hate to break it to you, but from the looks of it, he's been stabbed. Pretty clean wound, too. Honestly, it might be best if we call the police. No, Cindy practically shouted, stepping forward. He didn't want the police involved. I have this feeling it might make his situation even worse if we did. Larry raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue further. In the end, the two girls decided to stay put at the pharmacy, despite Larry insisting they should go home and that he'd call them when Max woke up. But they refused to leave. Hours passed, the night dragging on slower than either of them liked, until finally, the door to the private medical room creaked open. Max stepped out, wearing a fresh shirt that had been left for him, his hair tousled and his expression groggy but alert enough. Max! Abby cried, rushing forward. Seeing Abby here was the last thing Max had expected, and his gaze shifted to the girl standing beside her, recognizing her vaguely through the haze as the one who must have found him earlier. Thank you, Max said sincerely, his voice a little hoarse. For helping me out. You're welcome. Cindy beamed brightly. Meanwhile, Larry leaned lazily against the counter, arms crossed. Yeah. I'll just pretend that thank you was meant for me. You know, the guy who stitched you up, saved your sorry butt, and made sure you didn't bleed out all over my clinic floor. Max gave a small, grateful smile. He understood. Even if he hadn't said it outright, he owed them all big time. Max, what happened? Abby asked as she rushed closer, worry all over her face. But Max didn't say a word. He didn't know what to say. What could he even say that would make a difference in this situation? Instead, Max pulled out his phone and asked, I owe you for this, right? Oh, the bill. Right, the bill, Larry said, sounding a little too cheerful for the situation. It might be a little troublesome, but hey, if you want to arrange a payment plan, just let me know. He pulled out a receipt and pointed at the bottom where there was a printed QR code. Uncle, Cindy groaned, slapping a hand to her forehead. Are you seriously charging a student who was attacked? What about the doctor's oath? The oath doesn't pay the bills, Larry replied bluntly, waving the receipt. Everything I used on him needs to be replaced. But fine, if you're going to guilt trip me, I'll give him a discount or whatever. Larry extended his hand, ready to snatch the receipt back, but Max had already scanned the QR code on his phone. It's done, Max said flatly. I paid the full amount. You deserve no less. You really helped me out back there. Without another word, Max turned around and headed straight for the door, not even glancing back. I'm sorry, Cindy. I need to talk to Max, Abby said, quickly dashing out of the pharmacy and chasing after him. That left Cindy standing alone inside the shop with her uncle, who was just staring blankly, frozen in disbelief. Hey, Cindy, who exactly is your friend? Larry asked, scratching his head. Is he some kind of CEO or something? What are you even talking about? Did you get stabbed and lose your mind instead of him? Cindy said, raising an eyebrow. It's just, the first bill I made, it was a joke bill, Larry confessed, still looking completely baffled. I just wanted to mess with him a little for dragging me out of bed in the middle of the night, but he actually paid it. Cindy snapped the receipt out of Larry's hand and stared down at it. Her eyes widened as she read the ridiculous numbers scribbled across the paper. How was he even able to afford this? She muttered, stunned. Max kept his eyes glued to the directions on his phone. Honestly, he still had no idea where he was even going. The streets and neighborhoods all looked the same to him, completely unfamiliar, like a maze with no exit. The only good news was that enough time had passed since his fight and injury. If anyone had been looking for him, they'd probably given up by now. After all, there was still school tomorrow. And with how strict the government was about attendance, punishing parents with fines if their kids didn't show up, it wasn't easy to miss a day without a solid excuse. Sure, some kids managed a day or two off here and there, but for a huge group like that, not exactly easy to explain away, which meant the streets were relatively safe for him for now. As Max walked, he moved his shoulder slightly, testing it, and immediately regretted it. He could feel the tight pull of the stitches holding his skin together. With this young body, it shouldn't take more than a day and a half to heal up, Max thought grimly. But even if the wound closes up fast, everything else, the soreness, the stiffness. He gritted his teeth, feeling the dull ache running through his muscles. It was clear as day. I can't go back to school tomorrow. No way. I probably shouldn't step back in there for a few days, not until I come up with a real plan. Max figured he could skip a few days of school by faking a cold. Even if the other students knew the real reason behind it, it would still buy him the time he desperately needed. Right now, in the state he was in, there was no way he could take them on. And tomorrow? Yeah, tomorrow his body would hurt even worse than it did now. Besides, even if the school tried to hit him with a fine for skipping, it wasn't like it mattered. He could easily afford it. With the principal in my back pocket now, he wouldn't report it anyway, Max thought. Still, today taught me something important. Dipter and his little crew, they're way more ruthless than I first imagined. I can't treat them like a bunch of dumb kids anymore. I have to treat them like what they really are, an actual criminal group. And if they were a real gang, Max had to think like he was fighting real criminals too. If I were still in the underworld, stuck in this situation, how would I get rid of a group like theirs? Lost deep in his thoughts, Max almost missed the sound. Quick footsteps coming up fast behind him. His heart slammed into his ribs. Crap, did they really not give up after all this time? I'm not even sure I can lift my leg to fight right now. He spun around sharply, ready to throw hands or worse, but stopped when he saw who it was. The figure skidded to a halt, throwing both hands up in surrender. They both froze, caught off guard by the vicious, cold look flashing across Max's face. "Max, it's me, it's Abby," she said quickly, her voice trembling a little. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you or anything. I just wanted to walk with you. Maybe talk for a bit too." Max wanted to say no. He wanted to tell her to leave him alone, to stay far, far away. But honestly, he didn't even have the energy for that anymore. So instead, without a word, he just turned around and kept moving. Abby hesitated for only a second before hurrying to walk by his side, matching his pace. "Besides," she said, trying to sound cheerful, "with me here, I don't think they'll dare to do anything. If they come at us, I'll scream so loud it'll wake the whole neighborhood." At her words, Max couldn't help but let out a faint, half-hearted smile. It barely reached his lips. She had no idea. She had no idea that, although she wasn't the direct cause, she was part of the reason Max had been forced to suffer in silence. That they wouldn't do anything to her. That was exactly why Max had taken the beating. Why he'd endured everything without fighting back. So nothing ever happened to her. "Max, can you please tell me what's going on?" Abby asked, her voice soft but trembling. "It's those guys at school, right? The ones who were bullying you and Sam." Her hands fidgeted nervously. "We can do something about it, together. We could go to the teachers, or even talk to the police officers who came to the school. They can protect us." Hearing that, Max could only offer the same worn-out response, a half lift of the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a smile, it was the ghost of one. Such a naive way of thinking. Only someone who had never really been through something like this would believe that those in charge could simply fix everything. Someone who had no idea about the twisted things happening behind the scenes, hidden away where no teacher, no officer could or would reach. Abby kept talking, her words rushing out as if she could build a bridge to him with enough ideas. She offered everything she could think of, for Max to stay at her house, to get her parents involved, even transferring schools. But Max stayed silent. Each well-meaning suggestion only piled onto the frustration already boiling under his skin. And then Abby just broke. The tears spilled over, sliding down her cheeks and hitting the ground with soft, painful splashes. She stopped walking, and that forced Max to stop too. For the first time, he turned to really look at her. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Max." Abby choked out between sobs. "I know everything I'm saying is probably useless. Maybe you've thought about all of it 100 times already, but I'm trying. I'm trying to help you, and it's the only thing I can think of." Her shoulders shook violently as she cried, and Max could feel it, the rawness, the honesty behind every word. "I want to do something, anything to help you," Abby cried out, her voice shaking with every word. I wish the two of us could just run away. I don't want any of this to happen to you. Max, why does it have to be you? Her sobbing grew heavier, more broken. Watching her cry like that, Max felt something inside him snap. He couldn't take it anymore. Without thinking, he walked ahead, reached out, and gently pulled her hand away from her tear-soaked face. Then he used the sleeve of his shirt to carefully wipe away her tears. "Enjoy your life," Max said, looking straight into her eyes. His voice was steady but softer than it had been all night. "Don't get involved in this mess. Live your life. Study hard, get a job, get married if you want or don't. Have kids, get pets, experience all of it. Right now, it feels like this situation is your whole world, but it's just a tiny part. Your world isn't everyone's world, Abby. And no matter what happens, the world will keep moving." His words spun around inside Abby's head, swirling with the pain and confusion she was already feeling. She didn't fully understand what he meant. All she wanted was to go back to the days when they used to sit around playing games together, laughing until their sides hurt, dreaming about a future they could share, talking about living together, about chasing stupid hobbies and enjoying every moment. Why'd everything change so much? "It's best if you think of it like this from now on," Max said, his voice low. "Max died. The real Max died that day along with Sam." Turning around without waiting for her reply, Max continued walking, leaving Abby standing there alone under the streetlight. He didn't know if his words had gotten through to her, or if they only hurt her even more, but she wasn't following him anymore. The night air felt heavier with every step, but eventually, Max made it back to his apartment. As he approached the entrance, he spotted a familiar figure standing outside, stiff as a statue, arms tense at his sides, face unreadable. It was someone Max was expecting, and someone he had a lot of unresolved feelings toward. "Aaron," Max said, his voice cold but steady. "I have a lot of questions to ask him." It didn't take long for Aaron to notice Max as he approached, and not just notice him, but notice the bruises swelling across Max's face. Part of his cheek was puffed up badly from the number of hits he'd taken, and even now, Max wasn't walking properly, limping slightly from the blows to the back of his leg and other places. "Young master, are you okay?" Aaron called out, rushing toward him. Max kept his head low, his body swaying slightly where he stood. "Do you always ask such obvious questions?" Max replied, his voice dry and flat. "You can see what state I'm in." Thankfully, he'd changed shirts at the small clinic. Otherwise, Aaron might have completely lost it at the sight of all the blood. "I got your message, but you didn't send anything back. I searched everywhere for you," Aaron said, speaking fast. "I had the whole security team combing the school, but they couldn't find a single trace of you." Aaron looked genuinely frantic as he continued. "While they were looking, I decided to head back to the apartment, hoping maybe you would return. I called you constantly, but there was no answer at all. Young master, I have no idea what happened. Do we need to go to hospital? Do you need treatment? Please, just tell me what I can do." Max let Aaron spill out all his worries without interrupting, quietly listening, trying to pick apart his voice, searching for anything at all, that would hint if this worry was real or just a well-rehearsed act. Was it genuine? Was this just part of the job? Or worse, another setup? But no matter how hard Max tried, he couldn't tell. Aaron sounded real. It felt real. Then again, so had the people in the White Tiger Gang once upon a time. There was always a chance Aaron could be just like them. "How long have you been standing outside?" Max asked, his voice low. Aaron pulled out his phone to check. 3 hours and 43 minutes, he replied without hesitation. Max turned toward the apartment, saying just a few simple words. "Then come in and sit down. If you really mean what you're saying, I'm going to need you to answer some questions, and I expect you to answer them honestly." Aaron gave a small nod and followed closely behind. Together, they climbed the worn metal staircase leading up to Max's apartment on the second floor. That's when Aaron noticed it, the faint smear of blood on the back of Max's once white shirt. It must have happened when Max was testing just how bad his shoulder injury really was. As they continued to climb the stairs, Max caught the faint sound of Aaron grinding his teeth. Once inside the apartment, Max made a slow, heavy move toward the bed. Aaron rushed to help, but Max stiffened and shoved him away with a weak hand, making it clear, "Don't touch me." Eventually, Max slumped down onto the bed, his body protesting every movement. I guess if you really were working with them, Max said, his voice dry and low, me being in this condition would be the perfect chance to take me out, right? He leaned back against the wall and nodded toward the table. Don't just stand there. You can sit, but not here. Use the chair by the dining table. I got a lot to ask you, so you should probably get comfortable. Without arguing, Aaron did as he was told. He pulled the chair out, sat down, and straightened his back like he was reporting for duty. Master, I honestly have no idea what you're talking about right now, Aaron said, his hand pressed tight against his chest like he was trying to physically hold his emotions together. What happened today? For you to end up like this? Please, share it with me. If I know what went wrong, then we can make sure it never happens again. I swear it. I don't want you to be in pain anymore. Looking at him, Max couldn't help but notice Aaron had this look, almost like a kicked puppy, eyes wide and pleading. Max let out a big, heavy sigh. It's not a big issue, Max replied, his voice low and tired. Just school stuff. But based on everything you said, I thought you'd come running the moment I messaged you. He shifted slightly, grimacing from the pain in his shoulder. Didn't you have the phones bugged, or something? Or keep track of Max's location at all times? He asked. Aaron immediately shook his head. No, master, he said firmly. All of those things, you specifically forbade them. We listened to your request. You were the one who made it clear. No tracking, no bugging. You said if we didn't comply, you'd ask your grandfather to get rid of us completely. So I complied. I followed everything you asked to the letter. Max stayed quiet for a moment, letting the truth settle. Once again, it wasn't Aaron's loyalty that was hurting him. It was the actions of the old Max. But understanding the situation now, Max couldn't exactly blame him. Especially if the feelings between Abby and the old Max had been real. He knew how the old Max acted, and judging by her reaction earlier, they definitely were. But you knew, right? Max pressed, narrowing his eyes. You knew that, Max, that I was going through this every day. Getting bullied at school. Going to public school instead of a private one. You even knew that I wasn't spending any of the money, right? Aaron hesitated for only a second before giving a solemn nod. Then why didn't you ask, Max, damn it? Why didn't you ask me? Max shouted, frustration boiling over. I'm talking about me. Why didn't you ask why I did all of this? If protection and helping the Stern family is your top goal, then you should have still acted, right? Now, Max could see it clearly. Aaron was biting down on his bottom lip so hard that it tore, a thin trail of blood dripping down his chin. His fists were clenched tightly by his sides, gripping at his trousers like he was trying to stop himself from shaking. Max let out a long breath, pushing himself up from where he was lying and staring Aaron dead in the eye. I think we need to reset our relationship, Max said. His voice was calmer now, but every word carried weight. From now on, I want you to forget everything the old me told you. He leaned forward slightly, not looking away for a second. We're starting fresh, right here, right now. If you're really on my side, if you're really here to help me, then you need to prove it. Max paused, letting his words hang in the air before he asked the question that had been gnawing at the back of his mind since the beginning. First, tell me what happened to me. Why was I in that hospital bed? Did I give you any reason, any hint about what happened that day? A few small details had been learned from Aaron when Max had first woken up, but they were far too minor to piece anything together. At the time, Max had been way more focused on his own revenge and figuring out his new situation, rather than digging into what the old Max's life had been like. But now it was interfering with his everyday life in this new body, and he needed to know more. Aaron seemed like he had played a big part in Max's past, so how could he not know what Max had been going through? And then there was something else Max had figured out, the video that had been left on the laptop. In the end, there was really only one person it could have been meant for, and that was Aaron. Even if Max now didn't fully trust him, it was clear the old Max had trusted Aaron. Their relationship had been complicated, strange even, but before Max could deal with any of that, he needed an answer to something far more important. I told you the truth last time, Aaron said, his voice steady but low. We don't know any of the details, but I've had things looked into. He paused, locking eyes with Max. Of course, I knew you were being bullied, Max. It was the first time Max thought he'd ever heard Aaron call him by his actual name, and strangely enough, Even this Max felt like they were bridging a gap, taking a step closer to something real. I knew the struggles you were going through. Aaron continued, his voice weighted with emotion. Things are difficult because of the position I'm in. I have to constantly walk the line between my personal loyalty to you and my duty to the Stern family. He tightened his fists slightly, his knuckles turning slightly white. I haven't been able to find the people responsible or figure out if there's any link to what's happening at school now. But I'll tell you all the details I know, no matter how small they might seem. Max leaned in slightly, holding his breath for what he was about to hear. You were found in Notting Hill City, Aaron said. Your body was discovered at the side of Cure Lake. Immediately, Max's heart pounded in his chest, so hard it almost hurt to breathe. Notting Hill City. He thought, his mind racing. That's the city where I lived, where the White Tiger Gang is based. Most likely, it's the same place they dragged my damn body to as well. Max clenched his fists under the covers. And the city we're in now, this is Manker City. Could it really just be a coincidence? Is that what happened? Max thought, his mind spinning. Was Max's body, my body, dumped into that same lake at the same time? Did something happen that caused everything to switch? He gritted his teeth, a pit growing in his stomach. What if the other Max ended up in my old body? But that body, the one already on death's doorstep, there's no way it could have survived. You were found by a passerby, Aaron explained carefully. Just hanging there at the edge of the lake. And, for now, that's all we know. Although Aaron probably thought the information was insignificant, it actually helped Max more than he could put into words. It solved at least a tiny piece of the mystery that had haunted him since waking up. I know. Aaron's voice grew quieter. You probably wanted more than that. Some kind of trail you could follow to punish the people responsible. But I can't give you anything else. I'm useless in all of this. Max could see it. Aaron's guilt was raw, almost painful to witness. He understood. Given the situation at school, how could Aaron have gotten involved without exposing himself or Max? Just like what happened today, if Aaron had gotten involved at the wrong time, things could have ended even worse. He could easily imagine a different scenario, one where a group had dragged him into a van and driven him all the way back to Notting Hill. And no one would have known until it was too late. The old Max had really left no options for Aaron to help at all. I wish you could have let me help you more, Aaron said, his voice barely a whisper. It was the second time now. Twice Max had seen how the old him left the people around him hurt, left them aching with guilt and helplessness. Did I tell you anything? Max asked, his voice steady but low. Anything about what was happening at school? Did I even give you a hint as to why I would have ended up at the lake in the first place? I have my guesses about what's going on, Aaron replied. But you didn't tell me anything directly. It's clear you didn't want me getting involved because... Aaron trailed off. Max stayed silent, letting the air between them grow heavy. He could tell there was more, so much more, that Aaron wanted to say. And eventually it came out. Max, Aaron said, voice tightening, about what you mentioned before. I didn't tell you this earlier because I thought maybe our relationship would be better without it. I thought maybe without all the baggage between us, things would be easier. But things haven't gotten better. If anything, they've just stayed the same. So, he stopped again, but this time Max could see it in his eyes. Aaron was ready to finally say what he had been holding back. Just say it, Max shouted, frustration bubbling over. Stop dancing around the subject. What are you even talking about with this relationship stuff? None of it makes any sense to me. Why would I shut out my own bodyguard? Why would you claim we were close? And why the hell would I leave a damn video for you if I didn't think we were close? A video? Aaron asked, raising an eyebrow in confusion. Max immediately realized he might have said a little too much. That video, sharing it could do more harm than good. Maybe Aaron would really go full stalker mode if he knew. And Max couldn't afford that. Not when he had other plans that needed a lot more freedom than what Aaron might allow. Forget about the video, Max said quickly, waving his hand through the air. I want you to tell me what you were about to say before. Right now, I need to trust you. Give me a reason to trust you, so that you can help me. You say you want to protect me, but you've failed so many times. So this is your chance. Tell me why I should trust you. Finally, Aaron loosened his death grip on his trousers. His face softened, and a faint, almost bittersweet smile crossed his lips as he looked at Max. I guess you really did forget everything, huh? Aaron said quietly. Of course I'll always help you, Max. I'll always be by your side. Not for the Stern family. Not for anyone else. Because you're my brother.